All right. I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, August 15th, 2017. Is there anyone here to speak to anything that is not on the agenda for tonight? All right. Moving right along. First of all, our Planning Board meeting minutes for July 18th, 2017. Did everyone have a chance to look at those?
Yes.
Any errors or omissions?
Motion to approve the minutes from July 18th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right. Next up, the minutes from our August 1st, 2017 meeting.
I'd like to make a comment that I thought these were very well done.
All right. Not the last ones, though?
Kudos to me. The last one was just okay, but this one was good.
Thanks.
All right.
Motion to approve the minutes from August 1st.
I didn't read them. I'm sorry. I have to abstain.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chris abstaining.
I didn't read them. Sorry.
All right. Moving on. A&R for 198 East Street. Robert and Angela Redfern. Someone here to speak to that? Yes. All right. You want to come on up, or I guess go to the podium and tell us what we're dealing with here?
Well, I think I'm first. My name is Robert Redfern. I live at 198 East Street in Easthampton. We are in the process of selling our home. We have a building lot, that's an official building lot, that's located on our property. We're in the process of hopefully getting that cleared tonight so that we can transfer ownership of that property and another small piece of property to our next door neighbor, Sean Forrest. If there's anything particular that you need to know about this, I'm sure Bob Cannon can answer any specifications on it.
All right. I'm probably just looking at this wrong. Can you just show me
Yeah,
where
what are we
specifically?
looking at here?
Yeah, East Street's down there.
There's East Street.
Yeah, this would be East Street down in the front. Obviously right here.
Yeah.
You're extending
Our original
here.
piece of property encompassed this area right here, the whole thing.
Okay.
This is Sean and Halicia's property. So to help them square their lot off a little bit, we marked off that area to be sold, and then the building lot is right here.
Okay.
Leaving this here with that piece, that home right there.
So this is going to eventually be sold to them?
Yes.
Is that the
Both,
plan?
both
Both
parcels.
Oh, both parcels.
He's
okay.
buying this as a building lot, and his is a non-conforming lot, but it's narrowed. It was kind of like a
Yep.
pie-shaped property, and he's selling this as well. So Reggie is selling both of these parcels. This is going to go with this parcel, and this is going to be an A&R lot.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. You
Yeah.
said that this, including all this, was one, and this is a separate one. Currently, that's the way it is currently.
That's
Everything, this is not part of it.
That's not part of it
This
currently.
dark boulder
Got it, okay.
outline is what it was originally.
Okay, I'm understanding now.
So, Jessica, maybe you can help with this.
And this is weird. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Sean Forrest, by the way,
Okay.
purchaser.
Thank you.
This piece being a separate parcel makes mine conforming, so that's
Yeah,
why
right,
these two would be
right.
joined together. Okay,
Right.
just want to be clear.
So
on that.
this new lot A doesn't actually have frontage on its own?
Well, no, but it's being
It's gonna be
incorporated
incorporated
into
into
this
that,
one,
so
which
once-
does have frontage.
right.
So it's almost like a side lot change or a
Yeah.
rear lot change. The frontage it's just kind of modifying this side lot
Because
line.
it's going to go with that other lot.
Right, it's going to be combined with this,
Okay.
correct?
Yes,
correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
All right.
So are we evaluating this one clearly, which has 120, but this one as well? With this, so the question is, I mean, it looks like it's...
It's just
enough, but-
modifying the side lot line. So they're going to chop off a piece from here to give to this guy so his lot becomes more conforming.
So then we can assume this
So
already
this-
has the
that
100
frontage,
Yeah.
I mean, it
exists
looks
already.
like there's a scale. You could use
Yeah,
the
I
scale
was
if you
gonna
want to
say, let's
measure,
take a
but I would
larger.
say
Kinda what
that
I
it
was looking
looks
for.
more than 120.
I think
Okay.
it's 160. I have.
Okay.
It looks like...
That's fine.
All
So-
right.
But a question that I have is, so as part of this, do we have to, does Sean have to come back and get police back together again, or do we just?
No, because this is part of that, right? I mean,
Yes.
this
Yes,
is,
it is.
this whole thing is
Okay.
Is one deal.
cut, yeah,
Understood.
one deal.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
Alright, I
Okay.
just didn't know.
And
for-
there's two
for
parcels.
assessors.
There's two parcels.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, so this is parcel
A.
A. Lot A is going to go to Sean and make
Yep, I
this
understand.
lot more
Whole
conforming.
thing.
Right.
Then this is non-conforming. Now it's going to be conforming, and this lot is a separate lot that he's going to build
Yeah, I
on
just didn't know
someday.
for filing if this,
Yeah.
if this
Gotcha.
middle line went away and how
Right.
that works.
Same
But
question.
Well, eventually.
All right.
it will
Eventually,
disappear.
yes.
Because you'll sell. It'll when you sell it, but you'll be selling this and this, and you can't do anything
Okay.
other than, he can't get rid of it now, because now he's conforming, because
Right.
if he got rid of it, it'd be non-conforming.
So by eyeball, it seems this
All right.
frontage is easily larger than that, so
Yep.
it should be fine.
Yep. And the other ones, the other one meets.
Yep.
I motion to endorse the A&R for Redfern, Robert, and Angela at 198 East Street.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining. All right.
I'm sorry, who's second?
You're all right. Chet is abstaining from that because he just
Oh, hey, Chad.
appeared.
Chet.
Hi.
All right. What's the date today? The 15th?
15.
All right, Sean, I just wanted Harry to.
That's what I kind of figured, that once Harry was here, that was
I
it.
thought he was going to try to give me a hard time.
So, in addition to the Mylar, how many paper copies do you want? Do you want two, one for each of you? For each of the
Let me just hold them
property
all
owners,
together.
or?
Oh, sure.
Do you want to peel
I
them
would
off?
say, how many do you have, Jessica? What do you need?
I don't remember.
I think I left you 7 or 8. I don't
So
know.
here's one. You take that.
I can make copies of it. Two's enough.
Two's enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be
All
okay
right.
with that.
And then you need the Mylar.
I need that. Yeah.
Come on now, roll them up and
All right. So now coming for you.
include the Mylar.
Give a work on your signature. Try to improve it.
No, at this point it's official. If I changed it now, it'd be a problem.
Know what to do, yeah.
All right. Bob, here's the. You guys need the Mylar? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rubber band. There you go.
Me?
Sure,
man,
absolutely.
yeah.
No, we are a full service organization here.
Full service.
All right. All right. Thanks, folks. Good luck. Thank you. Moving right along. Continued public hearing for Plain Street Forefront Power LLC. Ed, welcome back.
How's everyone tonight?
Excellent. How are you?
Good, good. I don't have the ability to plug in, so we're just, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I do.
Oh.
Oh, my partner.
Perfect timing.
So we had submitted some additional materials to you guys last month. 3 things we submitted were the vesting deed. We submitted some additional information on guidance on how to treat the stormwater, or how to treat the panels, if they were pervious versus impervious, and then updated numbers for the decommissioning, which included cost of living adjustment and the 25% adjustment that you guys can charge up to for that. In the materials that we submitted the vesting deed. It clearly states in the deed hereby conveying also as a right of way from the highway across the land now or formerly of said heirs to Z. Brainard Clark to the tract above conveyed, which is our tract of land. I think that pretty much covers the site access question. With regards to the pervious versus impervious and how the panel should be treated for stormwater modeling, we submitted these 2 state guidances on this. In addition to that, we've actually got this issue. Surprisingly enough, we had this issue come up in another one of our projects over in Spencer. We had a call with Mass DEP last week, and they actually, from Boston, from the state, from the statewide office, are now treating them as pervious surface. So we're all good there, and that's the way that we modeled everything within the stormwater plan. Lastly, the decommissioning cost update. I provided the new numbers. I know that we had gotten some feedback from the town engineer this week. Happy to address those comments.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I realize you just got these yesterday, I think, right? The comments, but.
Sure. So the mobile is.
Can I ask?
Oh, hold on. Yeah, sure.
I definitely want to hear the address, but you updated the cost and the 25%. Can you just, for the camera and for maybe everyone gathered, just sort of summarize what you came to as a conclusion to that? Sorry.
Oh, that's good.
Scroll down real quick. Sure. So we originally had estimated the total decommissioning cost at $108,000. With the cost of living adjustment, which I went online and found that the Social Security Administration is usually using a 0.3% compounded monthly, brought the total up to $114,825, and then with the 125% maximum allowed that you guys can charge, brought it up to $143,531.
143, 500 and
31.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, so then you got this feedback from the city engineer.
Let me pull it up.
Yeah, take your time.
So the first comment was regarding the mobilization and demobilization. So the supervisor and management and the electrical disconnection and the silt fence and the permitting fees, those are the mobilization costs for that.
Okay,
So it was just poorly labeled, I guess.
okay.
So they are included.
They are. It's the items underneath that.
Okay.
The fence and racking removal labor rates seem low.
What about the, hold on, the demobilization cost, is that on here somewhere too?
No, but it's kind of baked into like the seating and the restoration of the site and everything like that. And
Okay.
other site work and everything.
Okay.
So you're saying it is again included, but you said no to begin with, and then it's kind of in there. I'm confused by that.
Sorry, I just had to go through it again.
Okay.
Look at it.
It's not pulled out as one line item, is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm
Okay.
saying, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so then the fence and racking removal labor rates seem low. This is the second comment from the city engineer.
We used $35 an hour. That was our standard rate that we used to estimate that.
Okay. Is this something you guys have done before, the decommissioning stuff?
Mhm.
You have?
Yeah.
And so that's rates.
And these are fully loaded rates, which would be the whatever equipment, which goes on to the next question.
Yeah.
Below comments. It includes like all the equipment and everything to remove the equipment.
Okay.
It's all there.
Okay, so that's all.
So are these numbers based on what you guys have actually done when you've done decommissioning?
Mhm.
Okay. And then his comments 4 and 5 have to do with the speed. I guess the estimate for how quickly it can get done. Are those also based on sort of your experience with actually doing these decommissionings?
And I actually padded everything
Okay.
quite a bit when I was going through it.
Okay. And then the last one, his question was, please have applicant confirm that if city had to perform this work, whether prevailing wage rates would apply, which I think is probably a valid question, because I think you guys probably have more flexibility with what you can pay versus what the city could, if they had to do that.
Okay, sure.
Do you know how that would impact these numbers?
I mean, the labor rates would probably go up, but yeah. I
You
mean,
don't know how.
I don't know how much.
Yeah.
That prevailing wage
It's
is a lot more than
kind of-
$35 an hour.
Yeah.
For this kind of work.
Yeah.
Probably even 60, I would think, $60 to $70 an hour.
Yeah,
Prevailing wage.
I was figuring on double.
I don't know enough to say one way or the other, but
But we do have a professional opinion from Dan Murphy saying that the rates seem low, so that's an indicator that they probably need to go up.
yeah.
But it can't go higher than 143,531.
Which is where we already are.
Well, no, it
Well,
can, because that number could, I mean, the decommissioning cost itself would go up, the 143 would go up.
I see.
And then that would influence the
you would-
25%
I see.
on top of it.
But I don't know who we could get an opinion on what the prevailing wage rates would be for.
Well, it's gonna depend on when it is. I mean,
Well, that's-
prevailing wage rates are determined by the
changes.
state, for like, 6 weeks window or something like that when you're
Right.
putting out bids. They're not valid for forever.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to predict what the prevailing wage is gonna be.
Right.
20
And
years
it's also
from now.
dependent on inflation and cost of material. It's all
Right.
it's all cost
I
related.
don't know how you would,
And you're trying to predict something that may be happening 20 years in the future.
right.
Where the rates could
Or it could be
astronomically
10
higher.
years. We don't really know.
Right.
Or lower if we go into a recession.
Yeah. Let's not think about that.
All right.
It's hard to project.
I think we need to stew on that for a while.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions for anything else?
No, I thought they did a good job answering questions.
Yeah.
I am concerned about the demobilization. Mobilization and demob doesn't. I don't see it in here. So I mean, I think that is usually 10% of. Well, not 10%. I mean that we usually estimate it at 10%, but it doesn't usually get to that much. It's usually like 5 or 6% for mob and demob combined. So that is a legitimate concern on that one. If it's not, I don't think it really is baked into the numbers.
I think it's getting closer. I do. I think that rate needs to come up. It is kind of what I'd like to see with it, and I think that you're right. The demobilization costs are not itemized, and maybe they can't fully be itemized, but it seems to me to be lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it broken out as a percentage of the overall cost for mob and demob, which is generally how it's shown for construction.
So are we thinking we need more information on this?
Or do you wanna just, you said 10% is typical?
I usually see it as that, but I mean, I don't. Contractors end up, moving monies around and making the mob less, or sometimes
Right.
making it more to get pad it. But yeah, that's generally how much I see is 10% of the overall.
Yeah. I
So
would
could
go
you
with that.
just modify it? I just would hate to see the
I know.
applicant come back
Yeah,
again
that's what I'm
for one
thinking.
line item. It just
Yeah.
seems
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I feel the same way.
I think it's reasonable.
And
10% looks good.
But that's got to be before the 25% we're just.
Yes.
Yeah, that's before.
I mean, so maybe if we raise that 10, the labor rate to say 50.
$50.
Well, there's a lot of variables in the labor rates, though, where they are and what they are.
I'm not sure how to handle that.
I mean,
You won't
we can
know.
try to just estimate and come up with a number. And,
We have had it back several times, and I think the applicant's been very
right, I mean, I don't think we,
fine with this.
I don't think.
you can do some math, Chris.
Yeah, I was just gonna see if
Alright.
I could find something online quickly on prevailing wage for a laborer in New England.
I wonder if we can stay on the same topic while he's looking for that, and I can ask about a letter of credit as an applicable way to handle that. Does that seem appropriate?
And that would be the easiest as far as the different forms of surety that you guys would ask for. That would be certainly the quickest and easiest path
Yep.
to provide that.
I think so too.
And you wouldn't have a problem with having that be a condition that before a building permit is granted or something, you would get that time-wise?
Suggested.
Okay,
We're on the same page.
okay. Any luck, Chris?
Not yet. On the prevailing wage program, mass.gov. So, see what I can find. Prevailing wage index, last updated January 2015. That can't be the right.
Even with that, you could almost double it.
If we can't find anything solid,
Yeah.
I would go for 50. That's me.
Well,
I'm scrolling through now. I don't see anything right now.
years.
I mean, what if instead of trying to change the hourly rate and figuring what the hours are, we look for a round number and look for $200,000 or something like that?
Can we just go by prevailing rates?
As long as we don't come up against the 25% limitation as sort of fair.
Well, I think what we're talking about is modifying what the underlying costs would be for the city.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'd,
So we're saying don't, but all of your calculations are based on rate, so how would he go back? I mean, he'd have to rebuild the whole formula. No.
well, no, that's why I'm saying instead of going back and changing the hourly rate, if we,
I mean, it's doable. It would just take a little bit of Excel jiggering.
I mean, I don't,
Works for
just
me.
based on what people are saying for the
It should be more.
prevailing rate, that it should be higher, and
Yeah.
that there may be mobilization or demobilization stuff that's not in there.
Whatever you put into place 20 years from now is probably
It's
not
gonna
going to
be
be enough
totally
to cover it.
different. Right.
No matter what we do.
That's
no matter what we do.
But isn't there inflation on the, or do we make
3%.
some sort of money internally on it that would cover that over 20 years?
Well, unless
Interest
it
or
gets
anything?
placed in an escrow, which I don't think is probably what we would do, because
Okay.
that means they're upfronting $200,000 to sit into an account. So typically, the performance guarantee that we see with subdivisions are letters of credit,
Right.
and they're easy for the city to cash in if we need to. Bond, but it's a little bit more
I mean, the
cost
idea
to
with
the
the,
applicant to carry it for 20 years. I think a
Right.
letter of credit is the easiest thing, because it's just renewed every year.
right.
Sure, gotcha. So in December of 2016, a person that operates earth moving equipment makes $33 an hour. A person who is makes a spreader mulching machine makes $48 an hour, prevailing wage. Power shovel trenching machine makes 48.
So,
Power driven equipment 48. Trucks, cranes, gradles. No, that's actually an oiler. I don't know what an oiler is, what that person would do. I guess they oil things. Hoisting engineer for cranes and gradles, 48. So yeah, overall it's $48 an hour. For generator, lighting, and plant and heaters, it's $33.50. Forklift operator, $48.40.
Okay.
Yeah.
we're gonna,
So,
Everything's 48.
which puts me near that 50. But your idea of just making it a flat 200 is, you know, I think that gives us a little bit more leeway than modifying it up to 50 would. As long as it's done in a way that we don't go over 25% in the, you know,
Don't forget, you also have a cost of living adjustment in
Right.
built in.
built in.
Right. I mean, I guess, given those two options, we can ask the applicant if, I mean, would you rather sort of modify this and come back with a $48 an hour, or just agree that the 200,000 would be reasonable for a letter of credit? I mean, I don't know how those numbers would play out, but,
This is one of those, if you get a penny a day for a month.
Well, plus that's just
Four.
the base labor. If you add in pension, health, base wage, it's adds like $10 an hour to the person.
I mean, if it's the 200K and it's a letter of credit, I don't see that being.
that's not objectionable for you,
Okay.
that works? Okay. I mean, that would be my thought, if people are okay with that.
I'm fine
Yeah.
with
I
that.
think that Jessica's right, that
that would
probably
be
does
the
this.
best way to go, I think. 200,000?
And
Okay.
can we just, can we call it a performance, or a financial surety, and not be specific about letter of credit? Because if,
Yep.
for whatever reason, letter of credit doesn't work out and they want to go a different route, then
Yep.
Yeah,
the city. be
Financial
working with
surety,
us.
and,
Okay.
I guess just that it's, who would approve the final version? Is it the planning department or something like that?
It's, I think in past decisions, it's referred to the city engineer, but you could say city engineer and planning department.
Okay, so we can just say in
it
the
would be-
amount of $200,000, you know, to be approved by the planning
You could
department.
just say a performance guarantee needs to be provided to the city in the amount of $200,000.
Okay,
We'll deal with the details.
okay.
Okay.
They're not going to
Sounds
get a
good.
building permit unless I have got a letter
Right.
of credit in hand, so.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any other questions or comments about this?
No.
Okay. Anybody from the public here have any questions or comments about this? All right. Planning department, we have any other issues that we haven't
Well,
crossed?
I think it would be wise to review the conditions that have
Yeah.
been set throughout the process and just review those.
So, the conditions we have so far, any pavement that is disturbed or removed at 115 Plain Street during construction of the road will be replaced following project completion. If the project requires decommissioning, the owner-operator shall physically remove the solar facility no more than 150 days after the date of the discontinued operation. Hydro seeding for soil stabilization will be completed by October 1st, 2017 to ensure vegetation is established prior to winter.
Can we
Is
revise that date?
Yeah. What's that?
2018.
2018 now? Okay. Applicant will apply pollinator-friendly, low-growing soil stabilizing seed mix for any portion of areas being reseeded. A financial surety in the amount of $200,000 shall be provided to cover the cost of removal in the event the city must remove the facility. And the electrical transmission line will be buried from the transformer to Plain Street. Does that all sound like, to you at least, Ed, what we've discussed?
Yep.
What was the last, can you read your last one again?
The last one was that the electrical transmission line will be buried from the transformer to Plain Street.
Transmission line will be buried from what to Plain Street? The
transformer?
Transformer.
Oh, there's no poles.
Okay.
We did not. That was new, I guess, and we probably, before we finalize this. Ed, have you seen this letter from the Barnes Aquifer Protection Advisory Committee? Yeah.
Yeah, these are the same comments they had when we.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So it's just topsoil remains on site. I don't know if we want to make these as conditions. Did everybody on the board get a chance to look at this?
Yes. I was a little confused when I got it because I felt a lot of this we had discussed earlier on in the process.
Yeah.
So I'm actually comfortable that this is being handled.
I think we've gone through all this stuff as well.
I think we had met with them just prior
Before,
to
yeah.
this, so we brought all the comments
Right.
up from that meeting.
Right.
And we didn't
Met
have
with
this
them.
letter yet, though.
They met with them an hour before their first meeting here before the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think that's all been addressed. Okay. So I guess we could make a motion.
I make a motion to approve the Plain Street Forefront Power LLC special permit
With,
with the following conditions, the 6 that you mentioned earlier. Do you want to spell them out again, or can I just say
No.
the 6
We'll just,
conditions?
we'll say with the conditions, we'll get them in the minutes.
Yeah.
We'll just.
okay, can I get a
I'll send
second?
this-
I'll second.
Yeah, we'll just cut and paste it. Thank you.
All
Third
right.
it. That's what I
Amanda, I think Chet got that second
Yeah.
on that one. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? All right.
Yeah, I had to.
Welcome to Easthampton.
So what's our window here?
So, I'll get you a decision probably within the next week, and then there's a 20-day appeal period. So once I filed it with the city clerk, there's a 20-day appeal period, and then, once the 20 days is up.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night. All right. Next on the agenda, new business, 4749 Cottage Street. Is there someone here to speak to that?
Terry Reynolds, T. Reynolds Engineer.
We'll go up to the podium because it's the
Oh,
only
yeah.
way we can actually hear you.
Yeah, get all your stuff set up.
Yeah, probably by the
No rush.
podium if you want to
Bring
stay
that
there.
over there too.
'Cause you-
This is being recorded, and we'll hear what you're saying through the mic for the audience at home. The thousands of listeners.
Thousands of listeners.
Maybe this week. They're fast forwarding right now.
Tens, maybe.
Hey, got like 85 hits last meeting.
Yeah.
Oh.
So my name's Terry Reynolds. I'm here on behalf of Harry Patel and Naresh Patel. I'm looking at a redevelopment in Jim's Package Store on Cottage Street. Currently what's there is gyms, and then the adjacent lot on 47 is the old gas station and currently auto repair service business going right now. So what's being proposed is to connect the two lots, join the two lots, and expand gyms along with construction of a 3-story apartment building with a small amount of retail on the first floor. The development will include some affordable housing. It's going to include 4 deed-restricted affordable housing units, and overall it will be 18 residential units, all 1 bedroom. There'll be service with stairways and an elevator service. Basically, looking at Jim's Package Store, which is right here. It's a L-shaped building with an alley in between currently, and so the proposal is to expand basically into the adjacent lot where the existing service station is here, with a connecting piece here, and then a small expansion on gyms. There'll be access through the building through a hallway here, because the majority of the parking is on the lower portion here of the site. And then that will connect through into an elevator area and an access door that connects over to the eastern portion of the site in Jim's Package Store. Currently, so what's being proposed is to provide 36 spaces. There'll be 3 handicap spaces. And what's required are 30 for the overall build-out and retail spaces. Stormwater management is being provided. It's basically, the whole site is essentially impervious currently. There is a small failed dry well on it. So we are replacing that with a new dry well that accommodates that same area for infiltration on site. Stormwater is being managed through 2 water quality units for the 2 discharge locations coming off the site, one on Adams Street and one on Cottage Street. There will be new sewer and water service. This will be a sprinkled building. So two separate lines, one for fire, one for domestic water. New sewer service going out to Cottage Street. Unfortunately, Dan Murphy wasn't able to get to fully reviewing this, so we got one final comment this afternoon that the city would like to have the sidewalk fully extended down Cottage Street across the front of the site. And so we will be asking to have that as a condition that will revise the plan to accommodate that.
You're agreeable with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can I just ask a structural question as I was going through this? The existing building for gyms, is that being demolished for this to go in? This is expanding on top of it. And
this is not expanding on top of Jim's. Jim's has a small build out in the front corner that's just a single story filling in that void area.
So Jim's will essentially remain as it is?
Yes. It has a 465-foot expansion in the southeast corner.
And the old auto repair and where the gas station was, is that
will be fully demolished.
Fully demolished, including
Yes.
the auto repair as well?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, Jim's Package Store. Yes, yes, yes. I get it. Sorry, I was thinking Jim's was the gas station. I totally get it.
And is the idea that the existing parking lot that's up there is going to remain for gyms and that the residential parking will largely be down below?
Yes, it'll be mostly gyms, but some of the gyms parking lot will provide for the residential parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any, I'm just curious about this, I really don't know the answer, but are there any special conditions or difficulties in building where gas tanks were underground at one point? Is that a concern?
The gas tanks have been removed. And
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's had a full assessment.
So it's fully buildable essentially.
Yeah.
When you say full assessment, do you mean also for contaminated soils beyond the tanks? So there's no contaminated soils to your knowledge
As a result of the gas station.
at the result of the gas station?
Yeah.
Is that report in existence anywhere that sort of vets that this is good to go?
Yeah, I didn't see
I
that.
do not have that in possession, but that can be provided.
Yeah, if you could provide that, that would be excellent.
Agreed.
Okay.
So you want a copy of the
This
profit
is being
assessment report?
proposed
Yeah,
under
exactly, thank you.
the smart growth overlay district provisions.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a site plan approval. So
Okay. So I get so this is all one bedroom, so that's multifamily housing, says one spot per unit, so that's the 18 spots for the residential. So you're saying the balance, the other 12 are for the two? The other 12 required?
One per bedroom plus visitor
Oh,
spaces.
two, that's right, yeah. Or,
And then the remaining is for the retail spaces. So we're up to 30 all told.
gotcha. It's one spot for 10, right? That's what I read, I think, right?
It's under, you gotta look under the 4ER only.
Oh, gotcha, I was not
So
looking
this
under
is a
40 hours.
standalone, reminder that
Yeah, it's just
this is
that
a
section.
standalone section of the zoning that it's its own thing. And so you're not looking at the other
Okay.
parking standards, you're looking at the parking standards within, which I think, honestly, if I'm remembering correctly, are modeled after what's existing.
Well, I think they just say, look at table 5, which I couldn't find.
Oh,
table
okay,
5, so I
all
was
right.
just like.
Well, no,
Or-
7.481, there's the off-street parking regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I was,
Okay.
that's what I was looking at.
All right,
Right, and it's the same except for you guys are allowed to waive some of the parking.
correct.
Right.
Okay.
Right, so multifamily housing is what we have here, so it'll be
Yep.
one for each bedroom.
And then one for
plus
every 10.
one additional visitor for every 10.
So that's 20 spots for residential.
Right.
And then 5 per each for the retail.
Other retail.
And how many, I just want to make sure I understand, how many retail spots are we anticipating? One?
It's just one, it's one.
And then
Well,
one
there's
other.
gyms and then there's a
Right.
1,000+ square foot retail space in the front. And preferably, we would have liked to have made it all residential, but the zoning requires retail in front.
Yep.
And have you started looking or talking to people about possible tenants, or is that still in the future?
Tenant is apartment tenant, is in Easthampton, is always in a waiting list, not for the commercial.
Okay.
So if you see on Union Street and Carter Street, it's always minimum 5 commercial is vacant since 1998. Apartment is never available. I have 189 apartment, but I have always full since last 5 years, and we have like still waiting list for the apartment.
Yeah. But how about for the retail space? Have you talked to anybody about that yet, or?
Retail space, if I don't find anybody, I'm going to open my own other store.
Okay.
Any
So
ideas?
it's not like.
What would it be?
Yeah.
What, just so we can think about spaces, because it's different for spaces if it's a hospital versus.
One of my nephew is trying to open computer store, computer repair, so that's why we are planning, not opening another convenience store or anything.
Yeah.
But, so,
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking for tenant.
Yeah.
But if I don't find it within like 2-3 months.
You'll use the
you go to
space.
open your own.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So that's that same kind of retail use for parking.
Yeah, which seems to be the most in here is 5 spots. I mean, depending
Right.
on, there's all kinds of different ways to do the math, but you either come up with 4 or 5 spots.
And either way, I think they've got a little bit of a buffer in here.
Yeah, it looks
with
like
the
it.
spots to begin with.
Yep.
What about trash?
Yeah. So I saw the dumpster.
Being provided with a dumpster in the rear of the site, back
Yeah.
here. There'll be a screened dumpster.
And will that be for the residential and the retail and gyms?
Yes.
Okay. And what about snow removal too? Is that?
Snow removal, there's some limited snow removal areas on the site. If it gets excessive, it's gonna have to be held off.
Okay.
So you're not going to push it over the slope.
There really isn't any snow areas pushed over.
Yeah, it's
unless
on the
we're
road.
pushing the street.
That's
People
okay.
are
Yeah, you'll
But
probably wind up.
Not at all.
In general, you know,
Fence
it'll
there.
depend on the parking use because there is a surplus of parking, so there, it may be able to, you know, lose some spaces also for snow storage.
All right. The gym's parking lot area, is that going to be repaved as part of this as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And lighting on here for the exterior lighting?
With lighting, and actually,
There's a revision to
I
that.
have an updated photometric.
There was additional supplemental plans that were submitted. Can't remember
But
when.
basically, what we're providing is safety lighting on site. The 14-foot high LED cutoff fixtures. And I don't have
Here.
cut sheets. Do you have the cut
I do.
sheets?
This is,
But this is a photometric. We're looking at 4 fixtures overall, 4 standing fixtures. Basically perimeter on the outer portions. The inner areas, the doorway areas and the stoop areas will be lit with ceiling lights.
Can you touch the lights just so I make sure I'm understanding?
So
It's
there's
the big,
one
yeah,
here,
1, 2, 3,
here,
those are exterior. And then you've got some on the building.
So interior
Yes.
lights from the building will light up the areas along the side that aren't covered by these?
Right.
Okay.
That's the intent.
And how powerful are those lights?
These are 54 watt, I think. I believe these are 59 watt.
And this is sort of showing the sort of shielding and direction of the lights so that they won't really leave the property.
Yeah,
Right.
that's fair.
Yeah.
These are cut-offs, so purposely, so it's not spilling into the roadways and other
Yeah.
sites. And Jessica, do you have the cut sheet for that?
I don't, I just have the 2 plans, so I printed out, I
okay.
think.
So they're basically a cut-off for the sleek-looking LED fixture, and mounted at 14, which seemed to be an optimal height without getting too
Okay.
crazy.
And then there's also a planting plan on here. It looks like it's largely based around that entrance and along the street side.
Yeah, there are bushes being proposed just at the entrance here to the larger parking lot, and then standard foundation plantings that are consistent with what's there now be planted in the front of the building.
About how high?
The foundation plantings,
plant, yeah.
they're going to be under the windows,
Okay.
so 3 to 4 feet.
And so then I think what the city engineer had proposed that we were talking about before, the sidewalk all the way in front, and I think he was talking about a grass strip as well between that. Is that,
Street, yeah.
did you get that comment?
Yeah.
Or-
I didn't get the idea of a grass strip. I'm not sure where that would go.
So he revised them. So those were from his initial comments, I think. So he sent comments on the 11th. And there's a language in there, which I think I forwarded to you. Inclusion of a vegetative strip between a new sidewalk and travel lane would improve stormwater quality and enhance traffic calming. But then he basically sent revised comments today. So I think he took that section out.
And just was proposing that drawing that he had kind of done?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is if we can do it and just coordinate with him on
Yep.
how he would like that to go. My take on, because he sent a sort of
He did
red
like a
line
little
picture of a
sketch.
photo.
Yeah.
Yep.
And basically, it looked to me like he's talking about a sidewalk and extending the fire lane that's out there.
Right. Yeah.
Down as traffic calming.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd be comfortable with us doing a condition that there would be sidewalk down in front of the structure there to the satisfaction of the city engineer or
Yeah,
something
well,
along those
we're already
lines?
proposing the sidewalk
Right.
down to here, so he's looking for the additional piece here.
Yep,
Right.
okay.
Just out of curiosity, who put together that photo with the line?
The city
Yeah.
engineer.
City engineer,
Yeah.
okay. Kudos to him. I really made it easy to understand what he was saying.
Yeah.
So anything in 8.3 then we just ignore for multifamily because this is not multifamily?
Yeah.
You're only going off the 40R regs and the design standards.
So,
All that time.
I read these.
so on the planting stuff, I don't know if the board thinks that we need more plantings or not. I don't, it seems adequate to me, but
Space
it's,
there.
Yeah, I mean.
and I don't think you really want to obstruct the view as you're coming in and out of that driveway.
Yep.
Um, And so then the other aspect of this was the traffic study that you did. Can you go over that a little bit?
So, we did a traffic analysis, and basically, between the two streets, well, actually on Cottage Street, there's about 2,300 daily trips going back and forth. This project is going to increase that count by about 70 trips, and consider fairly an overall scheme of things. And that doesn't include the trips that are on Adams Street. There's another 200-300 on Adams Street daily.
So I was curious about this because the traffic stuff always baffles me. But so you're looking at sort of potential use for what's there based on the various codes,
Trip
right?
generation based on the uses. Yeah, so retail in there, it'll tell you.
So it's not an actual traffic count. You didn't sit out there with a clicker and count.
No. All the trip generation is just based on studies over the years, and they update it.
Okay.
Can you show
Every
me
year or
the
two.
flow in and out of the lot as you intend it to be? Oh, there's two entrances, one over by Jim's. and-
There's the Cottage Street entrance and the Adams Street entrance over there.
But there's separate parking
Yeah, they're
lots.
completely separate
Separate,
parking lots, so
okay.
you go in
Yeah.
and out the same way.
Okay.
Each one. Yeah, they're not connected at all. In fact, there are different elevations too.
So in this traffic study here, you've got table 1, which is sort of existing. It's got an automobile care center and a specialty retail.
Yeah.
And then table 2 is the proposed, which is apartments and specialty retail. Does it take into account the fact that there's going to be more retail space, or is it just a single use, whether it's...
No, it's based on the square footage.
It is based on the
Yeah.
square footage,
Yeah.
okay, so it's
Yeah. It's per 1,000.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions or concerns about that?
It's probably fairly conservative too, because on the apartments, I don't think it accounts for how many bedrooms it assumes.
That satisfies.
Just an apartment building?
Well, the number of units.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And we would hope that people who are living downtown might not necessarily have to have a car either.
Right.
That they could be using a bicycle instead. to get
Right,
around.
in that location
In that
especially.
location.
Great location.
Okay, anybody else have any other
Yeah.
questions? Yep.
How close is that driveway compared to the one to
The new
the
complex?
next driveway over? How close is that gonna be?
This one? These two?
Yeah, your lower one, yeah.
This one?
How close is that gonna be to the one that's coming out of there already?
It's probably, it's about 25 feet.
Pretty close, almost side by side.
Right. Yeah.
That's not bad, yeah, actually.
I know they put a fence in there. Right now, they're pretty much abut each other, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
just open there, so
Yeah.
they're
They're
actually
just
kind of putting a
open.
buffer in where none existed before.
Yeah, for a parking spot.
Probably some kind of low plantings maybe, or,
And that
Well,
was-
they're gonna do a curb, and then there's gonna be those small bushes there on the corner.
yeah, on the corner.
you have to keep those small enough so that they don't obstruct the view.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
If you turn left or
Yeah,
right.
that's-
Yeah, well, they're
Definitely.
set back a little bit
Yep.
too.
Yeah.
And they're just baby or bushes. They're not gonna
That sounds about
You know,
right.
trying
We
to,
don't need it, we don't want to put it in.
Yeah.
It's a requirement or architect just put it over there, because I remember the architect putting like planting all over to just make it look good. If not necessary, we don't want to even put it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see somebody,
That's,
I'd like to see somebody pull out of there about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and take a left-hand turn.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
gonna be a
a-
You know,
challenge.
going right's gonna be easy, but trying to go, you know, it's a light change,
Well,
there's nothing but a pine.
it is far enough down though, so,
Here, this left-hand turn.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a
Yeah,
challenge.
well, you're far enough down, this isn't so bad. This whole thing is a mess. So
Yeah.
we're gonna fix that someday.
Someday.
I made that left-hand turn on occasion, so I know it's been done before.
Well, you got the light's gonna change down the other end, so it's gonna
Yeah.
save you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Board members have any other questions or comments? Anybody from the public have any questions or comments about this? Sure, you want to come up and give your name and get on the record here? Thank you, Terry.
Yep.
Hmm.
Annette Siegel, Mutter Street. Just a couple of mentioned trash. Will there be anything incorporated for recycling?
Yes.
Okay, how about green building, any kind of green building products, you know?
Recyclable materials.
Yeah, recyclable materials, you know, the paint, the, you know, non-VOC paints, anything like that.
I mean, I have not been able to, I might be talking to my contractor and find out, but at this point, I can't.
At this point, I believe it's pretty much standard building code
So we
with the new
can,
stretch code. I mean, the new stretch code is pulling in a certain degree of green, but that's nothing specifically special.
Okay.
and yeah, I want to make a comment also about the trying to take a left turn out of there. That's going to be horrendous. I mean, I don't drive a lot because I just don't like that whole little section in there.
As
But,
somebody who lives there, I
yeah.
can tell you it's a nightmare at
Yeah.
times trying to get out of that driveway
yeah,
at
so
15
it's-
Cottage.
Yeah, that, I
Which
mean,
one is it? Cottage? Yeah.
yeah, turning from there to the left, yeah.
After
to
taking a
Cottage
left
Street. I mean,
at
just don't-
5:30.
Just don't do it. You go down Adams
Or
Street
the
or
other way.
something.
Right, yeah.
You're just better off taking the right and
Yeah,
then
go
go
around.
around.
Yeah, go around. Okay, those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
There was a comment, I think, I'm not-
Yes, from-
internally, this one. The municipality has been named as a monitoring agent on housing restriction.
Yeah.
This will require the applicant to submit documentation yearly that the residents living in the affordable unit meets the HUD affordability requirements. Typically done by submitting income documentation, Consider addressing this as a condition.
Right, so that's one aspect of the affordable housing part is the annual reporting. I assume you don't have a problem with that requirement. And then there's also that the Department of Housing and Community Development has to approve the deed restrictions. So that's a condition.
I called DHCD and just talked to them, and they indicated they had been in contact with the applicant, that they've been having some good conversations and dialogue and back and forth, which made me feel better knowing that they already engaged the state. And so I talked to Bill Rail, who is at DHCD, and he indicated that that would be the case, that that DHCD would need to approve the marketing plan, the deed restriction before a CO or a building permit would be granted. I think it's more on the CO than it is on the building permit, but.
Okay. Oh, and then the only other issue was I guess the size of the building, that it allows up to 60 feet, is that right? Under
In the
smart
40R,
growth?
the height for 40R?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this exceed that, or it's not going?
It's 3 stories.
Okay.
No more than 45 feet.
Right, so that's,
It's well within.
so then the only other comment, building inspector commented that the project will need to adhere to all building accessibility codes. I assume you knew that. The health department commented that the owner is required to have a small roof overhang over each exit from building. Also must comply with electronic striker security door requirements of housing code. Owner should meet with questions about this. I don't know if you've talked to her about that or if you're aware of those requirements. Yeah, okay. Anything else from planning's perspective? Since we don't do 40R very often?
I don't think so. I mean, I took a look at what was presented for the affordable marketing plan, and
Right.
I feel better knowing that DHCD actually has to approve it. It's not just the city.
It's not just us, right? And
Right.
so then
that-
the condition is just that there's gonna be an affordable deed restriction that has to be approved by the city and the DHCD prior to a building permit or prior to a certificate of
I'm
occupancy?
trying to think under 15 Cottage Street, when that was finishing up, the deed restriction was finalized before the
So they could
CO was
start
given.
construction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
That's
yeah.
what
I
I
think it
wrote.
was the CO that was, couldn't be granted until all of that was in place.
Okay.
The one thing I do want as a condition, though, is the monitoring, because we do have other
Right.
properties that we monitor, and, we'll work with the applicant to make sure they have the right paperwork, but they do need to submit stuff on an annual basis, so that we can ensure that those units are being.
Right. And you have no problem with that, right?
Even it's a better.
Yeah.
That's even better, to collect the rent.
Right.
You get in rent on a time. If you rent in somebody else, so even If I have a more applicant, I like that even better.
Maybe we can lock in some language for that condition.
The monitoring?
Yeah.
Well, they'll just need to, they'll need to report annually.
Report annually.
They have to report it
So what they,
anyways.
what other entities do is they give us, it's all confidential information, so we lock it up when we get it. But it's the individual's name, it's bank statements, it's the income certification form that we provide them, that they have to check off. It's all of the documentation that's associated with that, so social security statements.
What would you call all of that?
We call it, monitoring, so it's the monitoring documentation. But they
Applicant will
need to,
provide an annual monitoring documentation report?
it's a
Monitoring
little bit
report?
more, but we'll,
Basically, it's permitting continuous monitoring by the city and providing annual information
that will
reporting
provide annual documentation.
to the
Just leave it
satisfaction
like
of the
that, to
city
the
to
satisfaction of the
confirm.
city, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yes, Harry.
Are we gonna need handicap parking and handicap access and
I think
all
it's on there.
It's on there?
There's, I think there's three,
3 handicap
which
spots.
is one more than they need.
Yeah, it's
I
one in
think.
front of gyms and then 2 in front of the retail and residential.
And what about the apartment? Are the apartments handicap accessible?
The first floors, well, they're all semi-accessible, the first floor units are all.
All 4
Okay.
handicap.
So the other condition was the sidewalk on the Cottage Street side.
Right.
Is the residential parking going to be assigned? No. Okay.
For handicap, you mean?
Pardon?
For a handicap?
Well, my next question was going to be, in the event that you have tenants that have handicap placards, are you willing to put in specifically a handicap space for each of those tenants as well as the additional?
Good question.
Well, what he's talking about though is you have 3 designated handicaps. He's asking if you're gonna designate additional spaces for handicap tenants.
So if you get a handicap tenant, then you can designate a spot if you need to. Okay.
Will that change,
I think there's enough room in
handicap
the...
spaces are bigger technically
Well, it
than,
depends on the need, because some handicapped folks don't need a.
they don't need the
loading ramp,
van
a loading
accessible,
Right.
yeah, okay, all right.
It won't meet ADA code though. Code requires it unloading. You can make it a handicap spot, but it wouldn't meet the code.
Yeah, I mean, if it came down to it, I think Accessibility Act means you gotta provide it, so.
Yep.
Right.
Restrict it.
Yeah, and it has to be with, like, it's 200 feet away from the door.
Right.
The entrance door.
Yeah, we
something like
always
that.
design handicap spots pretty much
Close
the most
the door.
accessible.
At the door, yeah, okay. Okay, so
So,
the
But
sidewalk...
There's three extra spots as a buffer, so you could put in up to like 6 extra handicap spots and get rid of it.
If you somehow needed to.
3 spots could
Yeah.
be worked so that you have the unloading ramp and.
okay, I have a question. So you asked earlier that you wanted a copy of the Brownfield assessment report.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that,
it.
so you still want to do that, or are you wrapping up your, sounds
I
like
don't
you're.
I don't know that we need to see that, but
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it doesn't affect, does it?
it doesn't affect the zoning. I mean, it may affect their own
If it
issues
was
with
bad,
the project.
outside of the planning board going through, would they be able to, are there other stopgaps that would stop?
If
it?
they hid contaminated soil, there'd be a lien on the property unless
Yeah.
they go through the DEP process to clean it up the right way.
They have their own
So they
issues.
need a condition,
And us
and we're
approving
good.
this project doesn't tell them that they can build on dirty soil anyway.
Okay.
Right,
Then
exactly, that's
no,
what-
I'm
There-
good.
there's
That's a
other
good
regs
So
in place.
I think for our own curiosity, if we were gonna have them back, I would be curious to see it, but I don't think it holds us up at all.
Yep, you're right.
So I think since we've covered everything else, at least in my opinion.
My job mixed up with.
I motion to approve the 47 to 49 Cottage Street for Harnish Patel. The plan approval under Chapter 40R Smart Growth with 2 conditions. One being the sidewalk on the Cottage Street side, and the other being, tell me, the summary reports.
Monitoring from the city and
Annual monitoring reports to prove financial viability.
For the
financial.
affordable units.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, can I get a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstaining, no one? All right. So, Jessica, timeline on this one?
I haven't started a draft yet, so hopefully by the end of what day is it? It's Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Maybe early next week at the latest, I'll have something in place, so. All
And
right.
is there appeal period on this one too?
I don't think so.
It's site plan approval basically, right? So it's,
Right, so, I don't think there is. Nope, I think it's just good to go once it's
Okay.
written.
all right. Congratulations, folks. Good luck. Welcome to
Good
East
luck.
Hampton.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck.
All right,
Right along.
moving right along.
Oh,
Plan
yeah.
revisions to Crown Meadow Estates subdivision.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
New, different?
Yeah.
This
Oh.
Well, let's hold on a second here.
This
Different from what you emailed me?
13 reflects
That's Harry's friend. They're,
Well, we're not the only ones affected by it.
I thought that was a cousin.
I can't hear either. Did nothing
Oh.
sense up? I can't hear.
Yeah.
could be. Yeah.
What's that?
You gotta remember
Mr.
this.
Gall.
Yeah.
I just thought he was your friend.
New to me.
Mr. Gall?
Yeah.
All right.
He doesn't talk.
He's a friend of the people.
Jessica, is there anyone coming on this, or?
Terry is
He
also.
hasn't said much.
Oh,
double.
Terry's back here. Okay, sorry,
He
Terry.
hasn't talked to relatives.
We all
Take
have to
your
get
time.
more organized.
Good. Watch Facebook. You gotta give him a dime for You got a dime for him. Of course, I'm back there. Oh, yeah.
You know, go ahead.
Well,
I'll catch up.
Terry Reynolds. Terry Reynolds in
Hey,
here?
Terry.
Oh.
Pleasure to meet you.
I'm here representing Bernie Gall.
Ah.
Bernie Gall.
Come on,
No,
guys.
no. Bernie's a nice guy. Bernie got this project approved back in 1991, Crown Meadow Estates. The majority is probably 75% built out at this point, and he's looking at completing the last 3 road sections of the project. But in doing so, because it's so old, some of the infrastructure has changed. Holly Circle has been constructed and come in from the other end, and so there's sewer that's at different elevations than what was originally proposed. The road grade tying in is different. And so what Bernie had asked me to do was to rework the sewer lines for him and adjust the road grades and make sure that everything ties in properly and that our design speeds are still meeting the standards. So I've done that, and along the way, there were some drainage issues that were just not designed so well, where we had catch basin to catch basin connection, reverse directions of flow. So tried to clean some of that up too while we were at it. So basically, this affects 3 sheets of the overall plan set. And my understanding is the original approval is valid as long as he's been working on it. He's continued to slowly progress with it. So what we're asking for is administrative approval of just these revisions, basically taking and redoing this the sewer lines down to Crestview, the proposed Crestview section here. Basically taking out what originally came down from Holly Circle and it all tied in and written down. So we were able to remove a small section of the sewer. And then we were also able to redo some of it to bring it up because it was actually very, very deep originally. So that's what we've done. In this area, I redesigned the storm sewer so that it's a little better connections. We don't have the manhole to manhole connections now, and we're able to adjust that. So it's a little more functional and a little more friendly towards the city and long-term functionality. Woodstock, this is an extension of the storm sewer, so we revamped that a little bit. We shortened the overall sewer just a little bit in this section and just reworked the pitches in there. And then on Holly Circle. Holly Circle was originally proposed to tie in at a much higher elevation. And when they built it, they brought it in at the grade it was. So we had to revamp this section of the road profile and make sure that it meets the design speed of 30 miles an hour out here. Additionally, Dan Murphy's comment was the typical standard for water lines is to follow the profile, but he wanted this to get straightened so that could avoid any air, minimize air collecting in it.
So that's one of the comments that he
was
had
what
sent.
came out
Okay.
today.
And you've got it clearly right there, straight.
Yeah, so
Okay.
straighten it out for comments.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated.
So this is just revising the sewer water drainage stuff.
Yep.
Nothing above ground.
No changes
Nothing.
in alignment, layout, nothing
Okay.
like that.
You said it was 75% complete. Does that mean some of the stuff that you mentioned, things that were the wrong direction and stuff, is that stuff in place broken now that you're going to fix? Or is that not been done yet?
This is just, it wasn't optimal design stuff. Not that it was broken or that it wouldn't work, it's just.
You can modernize it now.
It's better not to go catch basin to catch basin, because you risk having a catch basin freeze and preventing the other one from flowing through. That sort of
Okay.
thing.
So you're saying the development's 75% built out, but this is just underground utility work to.
Well, no, these roads are not constructed.
Okay, so part of this is also the construction of the roads, so we can continue building.
Yeah.
And the utility, all the utilities we're seeing are not constructed either at this point.
Right. There are a couple structures that are in place over in this area. This sewer manhole and this sewer manhole were put in place with the construction of Holly Circle.
Okay.
And so those are in place. The water has been put in place, and there is a T going off so that it's a little bit different loop system than what was originally proposed, and that's stubbed onto Holly Circle also. So we're picking that up.
The red line version of the plan?
So I get this, so this is, so I'm just want to understand, so since this isn't a red line version, is the dotted line what was there, and then the solid line is what you're proposing?
These are construction plans at
Okay,
this point.
so there's
there
not-
are
you don't
no old stuff. There's no old stuff on it. It's all
Okay.
been photoshopped and revised.
Okay. All right, I mean, is what it is.
So the other comment from Dan Murphy about acceptance of the infrastructure and the city streets and stuff, it seems like it's more a question for you, Jessica, about whether.
Well, I think this is gonna end up being board policy, and at one point there was a city councilor who was looking at changing the policies for street acceptance. And so I think this is, one of those things that would be taken into consideration when the board develops a policy
Okay.
around that.
Okay.
Or if the city changes their policy and how it's currently accepted.
So are you saying it shouldn't be any kind of condition from the planning board? Don't mean to.
I mean, it's an administrative process, so I don't know how you would condition it anyway. I mean, this is basically.
It's not a permit, it's just allowing a
It's
minor
coming off
revision.
of section 6.07, deviation from approved plan, and it just says, in the event the applicant desires to alter or change the grade of the street or the size, location, or layout of a storm sanitary or sewer water line or pertinent structure, he shall, and then there's the things. So there's not gonna be a decision. I'd probably draft a letter.
Right.
I mean, there's a performance guarantee on this still of 30,000. Not 30, yeah, 30,000. There's still a letter of credit on this property, which may not be enough to finish the road, but
30,000.
30,000.
It's not enough.
Okay.
Not even close.
But so this is not the point in the process where we can
I
remedy
don't
that.
think so, but I
Yeah.
think he's just putting it to you to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, Jim Gracia talked about this too.
For
I mean,
years.
this is
Yep.
not,
Part of this process is Bernie wants to get these roads accepted.
Yep.
And so that was part of having me work with Dan to bring them up to speed.
That was the impetus is for doing this. He was saying that no one would just come in and say, "Hey, I want to redo utilities."
I'm sorry.
Well, it saves some money. You're able to get rid of some of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm good.
So are we doing a motion to allow the revisions? Is that, I mean, it's not a.
motion to approve the revisions
approve the
as
revisions.
presented,
Yeah.
I would say is the
Okay.
motion.
I so move.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so I'll draft a letter and send it to you, Terry. It may be worth having that letter filed into the Registry of Deeds too, along with the revised plans, so that there's a reference to it. Above and beyond just our office, so, okay.
Thanks, everybody drops dead suddenly.
Well, this subdivision's taking long enough, you never know. I mean, really.
I know we're burning.
All right, thank you.
One thing I never know.
All right. One last item.
The weekend was
More discussion on new zoning ordinance for recreational marijuana.
I noted some, what I thought, very good comments. I think maybe from you, Jessica, maybe they were, Amy, I'm not sure which, about, there were questions about the statement of purpose that we made. Were those from you, Jess?
Yes.
I think the first two were about the reference to sections 13.
And two?
Penalties and to the limitations. Now realistically, when I put this together, I found other references that sort of referenced those sections in that point for the statement of purpose, so I sort of duplicated. I mean, that's why, but I don't have any particular motivations. Do you have a sense of what the ramifications of including
Well,
that?
it just seems odd because when I pulled it up, just to look it up myself to see what you were referencing, it's only referencing two sections of that chapter 94G. And one is section 2 limitations and one is penalties, and then all of the rest of the stuff that you're talking about, you're not referencing in that purpose statement. You know what I mean?
So you think it's better just to not make the statement of reference at all?
I think you could reference it, and in the medical marijuana, we do reference, but we reference the CMR. So the CMR is the regulations themselves.
Right.
So since the regs aren't out yet, you can't reference the CMR. So either, I think it's a little I don't know what to call it because the bill looks at amending certain sections, but it's not the complete bill. So it's the act that was passed plus the amendments. So it doesn't have like a concise name right now. So either reference two of those, both of them, because that's all you have right now, or just put a placeholder until the CMR comes out and then you just reference the CMR.
Well, the other thing we talked about is, I mean, like we've done in the past with this, we've sort of thumbs up to this language in general, but we all sort of acknowledged at the last meeting that, this is all part, this is the first step of multiple parts, and so I think we can probably, the general idea is to reference the statute and the regs, and so we can wait to define that when we have more clarity from, for one thing, I think it's a matter of getting it formalized as a statute and also getting the regs, so I think that was our purpose, right, is to reference all of that, and so we can...
In truth, I'm kind of comfortable just referencing those two, having seen it elsewhere, because they really talk about the penalties and limitations, which are the only points that I think need to be referenced in the purpose, because that's what it's saying, is that you don't violate, which is why I think it pulls out those two, because those are the only sections that deal with violation. I think it's good.
But there's a section of the law that's all about local control. There's a whole section on local control. So I don't think that you're referencing that section.
Enough.
Well, I just don't think you're,
I'm open.
I don't know.
Yeah,
we
no.
could just leave it as a question for now, but I just want to point out that I think ultimately, I think what you want to reference is the CMR.
Right. Yeah. And you made a comment too about how I had referenced, and rightly, the statute that just changed, or the there's a amendment on it, and that needs to be updated as well.
So right now it's...
That was in flux for a while.
It's Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act merged with the House Bill number 3818. That's the whole package, is merging these two things together, which is what this document is. It's a merge of those two things.
That seems like a fairly easy semantic fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, with it just referencing the CMR when you have the CMR number.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
So I don't know if we want to start off with a discussion, if we want to let the public comment again, or how we want to proceed. I know that we came back, we were going to talk about our own sort of initial thoughts on distance from schools and zones for the various uses. I think we could float that now, or we could see if members of the public have thoughts on those issues or other aspects first, and then
You're the chair.
Circle back. All right, if no one objects, I'd open it up to anybody who's got any comments. Mr. Boyle, I've been waiting patiently.
David Boyle, 146 Hoyle Street. Just a couple of points of reference, just as you talk about distances later. The Chapel Street entrance of Maple Street School is approximately 207 feet to the front corner of Union Mart. The distance from Union Mart, the front right corner, to the left corner of Brass Cat is approximately 675 feet. And the distance from Orchard Street, across the street from Union Mart, next to Nini's, the distance from Orchard Street to the beginning of the boardwalk is approximately 1,050 feet. I'm not advocating anything, I'm just giving you some distances, a little bit of perspective. There was a comment at the last meeting that 60%, it was, I don't think somebody intended, but it's been said that 63% of the adults in Easthampton supported legalization. I would say that 63% of the voter turnout supported legalization, but I would also say that just because someone can vote or just because you're 30, 40, or 50 does not make you an adult. And I'm serious, you know. One of the arguments for regulating marijuana, like alcohol, gambling, and tobacco, is the promise of economic development and tax revenue. And I understand the potential and the hope for that, but I think it's an empty promise. I don't know if you can do anything about it. Lottery aid has been slowly taken away. School busing was promised. It's gone. So what the state can give, the state can take away. So, you know, it is what it is. Those are just 3 observations. Opinion. In regard to marijuana, I generally am in favor of decriminalization, understand the bad consequences of mandatory sentencing, and appreciate the medicinal benefits. I also realize that even though marijuana is a mind-altering drug with other negative effects, the question whether marijuana legalization is a good or a bad decision is not a scientific question, it's a political question, just like alcohol, gambling, and tobacco. And it seems the political question has almost been settled. The state hasn't come out with the regulations. So it's coming. I think it's good that the planning board is proactive. Hard to be proactive when you don't know everything. But anyway, my gripe is after seeing the article, the Mass Live article regarding the last planning board discussion and of the potential marijuana zoning, and then watching the video, I must strongly state that I wasn't impressed. I do not think the demeanor displayed is worthy of the difficult challenge of addressing this issue, and the idea of promoting Easthampton as a marijuana destination city is beyond your responsibilities and is a bigger question than you're capable of. Those remarks were probably, it may have been thought to have been lighthearted and funny, but were disappointing and reckless. Some would argue that acceptance, openness, and the removal of taboos would or can unlock personal and community benefits. That very well may be so. But perception is reality, and the current reality of potheads is one of underachievement and unfulfilled potential. As someone who's grown up in Easthampton, in the days when people would say you don't need to go to school, you're only going to work in a mill, in the days when you know, Easthampton sucks, we've come a long way, and I don't really care for the High Times reference to Easthampton. I understand fully that addiction is a disease of variable origins. It's not a choice. I am no health professional, but while living in Easthampton most of my life, being a father for 28 years, coaching youth hockey, I have observed family and economic stress, ignorance, and permissiveness lead to addiction with unhappy endings. Additionally, the term opiate addiction is becoming bastardized due to the irresponsible prescribing of painkillers. The people that I know that are dead from addiction didn't start with painkillers. They started with marijuana. And as a coach last year, one of my players got caught with pot at school, and I talked to him, and it, you know, the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "It's legal now." Well, it's not legal, and he got in trouble, and it's derailed his career a little bit. He's 16 years old. He had a good internship with a plumbing outfit, and I told him straight out, I said, the difference between a $15 an hour plumber and a $45 an hour plumber is a drug test. You gotta use your head. He'll come out of it, but you know, it's just because two people stepped in and gave him some talking. Time will tell about all this. I'm old school, divisive, and a cranky, miserable bastard. But I hope that in the end, if you make an error, that you err on the side of the youth. That's all I'm going to say. There's no freedom without responsibility. And the people that were advocating it last week were self-interested, and the attorney is selfish. He's been fighting this he's been advocating this for a while. And the baloney that he gave you, that you don't need to have a ballot initiative if you want to have cafes, that's crap. That's just from him. So, you know, you're going to have legal counsel. You're going to be wading through this, and I'm confident you'll take it. But I just think that your responsibility is not to the self-centered and self-interested promoters, but to the youth of the community. And there's no one here tonight, like last time. And there's no reporter. And you're absolutely right. And I'm sorry, but there's no one compared in terms of the self-interested, self-promoted promoters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Gosh, I should get up.
You don't have
I love it.
Yes, considering I was kind of, yeah. Annette Siegel, Flutter Street. All right, so yes, I am an advocate for, you know, I'm glad we passed that marijuana can be legal. Several years ago, I was in a lot of pain because I've had both my hips replaced, and at the time I was going to try to go and get certified for medical marijuana, and that was ridiculous. I know the laws, it's changed a bit now, so it's a lot easier to get medical marijuana, but I would rather be smoking a joint than taking opioids. You know, I don't believe that smoking pot is going to, you know, cause you to go on, you know, painkillers. I think it will actually help you to get off of them. And it's, you know, I grew up, hey, this is the 48th anniversary of Woodstock. I was there. And you know, we just passed it between our cars driving down, and, you know, it wasn't legal then. And, you know, we do have to worry about kids, though. It's true. This is what we have to do. And they're doing it now anyways. They're drinking now anyways. And it's like, but we can't, you know, do it so openly or have storefronts so open that kids can just walk in and grab, you know. I don't know is it going to be like you have to be 21 and over to buy? You know, so that's, you know, but so it's going to have to be a really monitored thing. I'm, you know, again, I'm for it. My only other concern is the police, how they're going to monitor driving and that type of situation. But as long as everybody does a thorough, you know, vetting of whatever, you know, the buildings or the storefronts and all that, I see nothing wrong with it. You know, it will bring money into the town, and it might get people who are in a lot of pain off, you know, some really nasty drugs. I was lucky I didn't get addicted to it when I was, you know, having my hip surgery. But there were times I wanted to just run down to streets of wherever I could go to find drugs to relieve the pain. And if I was able to just, you know, have a little bit of nice calming drugs in my house of marijuana, it would have been a lot better. But yeah, we just, as long as everything is vetted beautifully, and as long as, you know, it's kids, you know, the controlling, not being able to have the kids gets, you know, so involved or so have access to it. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Courtney, anything?
Be nice if you kept it off in Northampton Street. I don't want to get up there. We gotta have a place where people can come with their families. Hopefully there's gonna be shopping down there someday. Maybe a Starbucks, maybe a few other things. Maybe it's gonna bring in some business. It's nice to have a place in town where mothers could bring their kids, young kids, without seeing somebody follow down or acting stupid. Can act stupid enough on booze, but maybe you might consider not putting it down. Put it down where the Bermuda Triangle is down on Cottage Street, you know?
it would fit in good there.
The Bermuda
And then you've got schools that are close to school, but if you kept it off Northampton Street, it might be nice.
Are you talking about by
Come into
gyms?
town and not be affected.
When you say the Bermuda Triangle, you're talking about by gyms, that
Bike
parking,
lanes?
that triangle parking? I just want-
My kids call it the Bermuda Triangle. You got Amy's and.
Oh, okay, that's what you mean, okay. Sorry, I need to.
Oh, got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That would just be my opinion. That's not gonna matter.
Okay. Can I share my experience?
Please.
So I went to Denver this past week for a conference. And I was able to, on one of the days, go out and take a walk. And there are recreational marijuana shops all around there. So I was able to visit two. And I found them to be fascinating, and I took some notes. So I kind of went, the first one I went to, I did like totally like, private detective, secret reconnaissance guy. So I pretended that I was going to buy something, and so I went in, and it was right on 16th Street, which is basically the downtown kind of commercial district where they have a main street that is not, your cars can't go down it, so it's basically a mall. So that one looked just like an Apple store. They had instead of having a marijuana leaf, they don't have any of that. It's just a green cross, like a red cross symbol, but it's green. That's the only symbol you need to try to find one of these places. So it's not obviously a marijuana shop to kids unless they knew what they were looking for. So you walk in, and immediately upon walking in, there's someone waiting at the door, and she has this clipboard, and she asks you if you've been there before, and she asks you for your ID immediately. So I gave her my ID, she checked it, she wrote down my name, and she asked me to have a seat. So it's all white walls, leather chairs, in a waiting room. So eventually, after a while, she calls my name, and I walk through another door, and in there is a queue of people. So there's like 3 or 4 people waiting in line in there, and it almost looks like a bank tellers. They're like bank tellers with glass tables. And as you're waiting in line, there's a menu, an actual, it looks like an Amy's Place trifold menu of things you can buy there. It was fascinating. So I'm looking through it. It's out in my car. So I walked up when there was a teller. They call them bud tenders, which I thought was great. So a bud tender will call you up to their spot, and you'll stand there, and they will ask you what you're looking for. Underneath the glass is all of the edibles you can buy, and then there's little glass canisters that that have different kinds of marijuana you can purchase. And then if you want to, you can smell it, you can look at it, you cannot touch it, and from there you order. And then there's also like vape pens and oils and other things, paraphernalia you can buy as well. Then you make your purchase. It's cash or ATM, which is essentially not really they call it debit, but it's essentially you swipe your debit card and cash comes out of an ATM machine behind the counter. They give you back whatever change you need. Then you leave. There was security there in the waiting room. And so then I went back through again. I actually asked her, I went back through and I asked her, like, what, and I'll add, the bud tender actually does a second ID check. So there's 2 ID checks just to even talk to someone about marijuana. So when I went back in through, I asked her, like, what are you looking for? And she said, I'm looking to see if the license is expired. If it's expired, you're out. If it's damaged in any way, you're out. If it looks like it's been tampered with, you're out. You're not. And I asked her, what about if someone came in, like a 30-year-old with a 12-year-old kid or a 14-year-old kid? Would you make the kid wait in the waiting room? She's like, no, they wouldn't even be allowed in. They would be removed. You can't bring children here at all. No one under 21.
It's reasonable.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting that no one under 21 could even enter the door, regardless if they're with an adult. So that was kind of fascinating to me. So when you're waiting in the waiting room, you don't even see any marijuana. You don't see anything from the street. So when I talked to the bud tender again, I asked him about some other places to look at. He said that particular one was a high-end touristy one, but he recommended me to another one down the street that was off the main street, off the mall area, that was more for residents, that were like locals that would go to it. So I went down to that one. So that one was definitely something you'd see here. It was a brick building, 5-story brick building, on a side street. For that one, you walked in and to the first floor, and there was a waiting room there, and she immediately said to me, as I'm walking down the hallway towards the room, she could see me, and she's like, "Hi, are you here for recreational marijuana?" It's because she wants to let me know before I get there that that's what I'm here for, so that I can say yes or no, and she knows what's happening. I ended up telling her what I was there for right from the beginning on that one, but she checked my ID, and then she gave me basically a number, and asked me to have a seat. So I sat down. And then when my number was called, when my number was ready, she asked me to take the elevator to the 5th floor with the number. So I walked up to the 5th floor, and then there was open it up. There's a door with a lock on it, and the person behind that door, I had to show my number through the window. They unlocked me and let me into that door. They checked my ID a second time, and then when I went into there, it was just a single room with like 2 people behind a counter. It was much smaller, but the same thing. It was the second ID check, like I just said, and then the same exact thing, containers. But this particular place, what I thought was interesting about this place is that because I told them right from the start, they kind of gave me a walkthrough of everything that they would tell a person. So like they showed me the container. So if I wanted to buy, say, a bud of pot, whatever it would be, say it was $60 worth of pot, it would not be the pot that I see, it would be that same pot, but it would be already in its sealed container with all the stuff on the side. Like, in fact, for this place, there was some vitamins added, so it had all the ingredients that are in the pot for additives. It showed the manufacturing location, so what factory or wherever it was grown in, the room it was grown in, the date that it was packaged, the expiration date. So it had all that information. Again, I asked, like, could I just eat this here or smoke this here? And he said, absolutely not. You cannot consume any marijuana on the premises, and because we would also lose our license. It's not just even you. We would lose our license if you had consumed anything on our premises. And then there was no smoking outside. Anywhere in the city, or so probably in the entire state, I imagine, but there was no smoking marijuana outside. So I thought that was, I thought that was really interesting and they had the same thing. You could see and smell the marijuana in the glass containers, but you couldn't touch it. So I thought that was really interesting that the 2 different aspects of it. They both did the cash or the debit card, but what I liked about it was and they also said that they wouldn't even allow anyone in that was under 21, even with an adult. So that made me feel good that neither establishment had a big Cheech and Chong thing like we discussed last time, or a big marijuana plant in front. It was just a green cross lit up, and it was very professional. Neither one of them. I didn't see a school nearby. There was a college nearby, but I didn't see an elementary school nearby on either of them. But that's because I was in downtown. It might be different outside the city. But I wouldn't see that it would be any sort of danger for kids by a storefront that just had a green cross on it.
You said that they didn't allow any smoking outside anywhere.
In the entire
city. They have
city.
smoking rooms or places,
No.
or you just go home with it and smoke it in your own home?
Yeah, right. They don't have any public consumption allowed in any sort of public facilities. So no.
Except the Denver initiative that Jim talked about.
Initiative 300.
Right,
They
but
actually, the
that's-
second place I went to, they mentioned this Initiative 300, which is going to allow them to have coffee houses or whatever, but they don't have that legalized yet.
Is that just for the city of Denver or the entire state?
Just for the city of Denver.
Just for the city of Denver.
Okay.
It's draconian.
No,
for those that still have
from what I
restrictive
understand,
stigma.
each city has their own. They go by the state regulations, but where you said that they didn't allow any smoking outside.
Right.
If I read it right, and I can't remember the name of the city, they do allow smoking quarters, they call them, that you can go. But they're, again, from what I understood from what they were saying, even if you went to one of these smoking rooms or whatever, you still had to show an ID.
Right.
Because they want to know if someone is selling you if you're not 21.
Gotcha. Interesting.
So I found that interesting, that you could have the pot, but and go to the smoking room, but before you get in the door, so to speak, you have to show your ID.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
which
found
was the
that.
same with this?
I
That was the same.
suspect that is gonna come from the state, the checking of the ID, and we
Yeah.
probably won't have to add something.
Well,
like
that's the
that.
part. I mean, I'm really curious to see how the state deals with this relative to the medical marijuana. I think it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see what, I mean, because a lot of the stuff that we dealt with the medical side revolved around the fact that there was still a large black market, which I think
Yeah.
people are hoping there will be less of one if it's legal recreationally. There was no advertising or signage, or, I mean, all of those, the medical facilities can't have any odor or signage or anything like that that suggests in any way. So like you don't have the same issue with marketing because you're not getting foot traffic, you know, it's more sort of, you're going to go to the nearest medical facility. So some of those things that are a little different, I'm curious to see how the state is going to handle that. I don't know that we know that yet, but that, I mean, what you've described sounds incredibly professional and relatively easy. I mean, I think that whether it's a marijuana leaf or a green cross, I mean, I think after about 2 weeks, everybody knows it's the same thing, right? So like,
right.
that's
So
I mean, that is what it is, but I know that that's when I was out in Washington, that they do the same thing there, that it's the green cross. But you know, so that stuff, you know, I think the marketing aspect of it, where you are trying to get people in off the street, and hopefully you're aiming at 21 and over. But I mean, that part is the wrinkle, or one of the wrinkles that's different for me from the medical to the recreational. But I mean, I think it's, you know, I know from some of the legislators and people that were on the committee that have been working on this at the state level, they all took trips as a group to Colorado and Washington and California, and they've seen all of this stuff firsthand.
Yeah, there's
so,
a documentary on PBS every once in a while. You'll go on it. WGBY picked it up. Marijuana City, they used to call it. And they'll go in, and of course the Green Cross, everybody knows, they're identifying. It doesn't matter whether it's Denver or somewhere else, East Congamunga, the Green Cross is there. So I don't know how that'll go over.
My hope is that we can forward some more components of what a potential zoning would be. Two of the aspects I think that would be great to maybe talk about a little bit are the things that were basically assignment. One, distance. I would also like to throw in a third. You threw out some ideas for definitions of location, types of facilities.
Right, so if you go to the law, there's already, and you know, when I worked on the medical marijuana ordinance, we had the regs in place, and I worked with staff at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and with planners from every planner in the region. We had like a working group, and we took the regs and we translated it into a model ordinance that we could all use, because we were all sort of struggling with the same thing. So when we did that, we lifted the definitions straight out of the medical regs and put them into the zoning. There was no reason to change it, it's already defined. So
can you read those four that you put in there now?
So yep, I can. Hold on. So the kind of catch-all definition is marijuana establishment, which is a marijuana cultivator, independent testing laboratory, marijuana product manufacturer, marijuana retailer, or any other type of licensed marijuana-related business.
So that would include consumption, potentially.
Well, so the consumption part, so what's different than what happened in Denver is that Denver, there was this need for tourists, right? So people were coming to Colorado. They were buying. They can't consume it in the retail facilities, right? They can't consume it in their hotels. They can't consume it anywhere. So they passed this initiative. It's a temporary initiative. It's only in place for 3 years, to allow establishments. It's like BYOP. Instead of BYOB, it's BYOP. So you can purchase at a retail facility, and then you can bring it to these locations, because otherwise you're not allowed to transport it across state lines, so you have to throw it out before you leave. So it was to sort of address that issue there. In the Massachusetts one, it very specifically says that consumption can only happen on the premise where it's sold.
Oh, jeez.
So you're not gonna have a situation where you're gonna have a yoga studio that's gonna allow people to come in and smoke pot. That's not allowed. The way that that the law is currently written, now, question is, does the law translate to the regs the same way? I presume something like this it will. I can't imagine that they're gonna change this in the regs. But right now, consumption is only on the premise where it is sold. And it says it multiple times over and over in the law. So that's, right now, it's either gonna be a retail facility that has a place where you can consume in that location, which is different from what you experienced in Colorado.
Yeah.
Or it's, you know, so the gray area, or where you can sort of pick this apart, is, you know, consumption on the premise where sold. So if the consumption is a product which is an edible that a restaurant's creating, you have to consume it on site. Maybe. I mean, again, some of this stuff is, the interpretation could go.
Yeah, so you couldn't buy like an eighth of marijuana. You couldn't, unless you're bringing 12 friends or something. Like, how are you going to smoke that much when you're there? It doesn't
Right, I mean,
make
you
sense.
could bring it with you.
You can bring it home. Okay,
Right.
just
So, but
so
I'm
you
just
can-
saying that
okay,
the
I understand.
consumption can
Sorry.
only
Oh yeah,
happen
so it's
in
a
the
public,
place.
it's a public business that you can still bring it home.
You can still bring it home. Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, importantly, what's being said there too is the consumption aspect is rolled into that particular definition.
Well,
That you just listed a marijuana establishment.
Well, because
and had
that's the umbrella. So cultivator is not for consumers. Product manufacturer is not for consumers. The only definition that has consumers is marijuana retailer.
Got it.
So if you're
So
a
that-
cultivator, you're cultivating, you're processing, you're packaging,
Testing.
you're transferring.
Right.
No, testing is a separate definition. Transfer to other establishments, but not to consumers. Product manufacturer, you're obtaining, you're manufacturing, you're processing, you're packaging, you're delivering, you're transferring to other establishments, but not to consumers. It's very clear. And then retailer is an entity licensed to purchase and deliver marijuana and products from establishments, and to deliver, sell, or otherwise transfer marijuana and marijuana products to marijuana establishments and to consumers.
Okay.
But so you could have a business that meets two of those requirements, right? You could have a cultivator that also has a retailer component, right?
to
But
their-
you'd be licensing both operations.
And what's different between rec and marijuana, and this is, I think, an important distinction, is that under the marijuana regs, the company they can only sell their own product.
The medical.
Yeah.
Medical.
Yeah.
They have to grow, and then they can have dispensaries in other locations across the state, but they are not allowed to sell material or products or product back and forth between one another. They are tracking seed to sale in their own entity. And there's a lot of money. There's like, big money to get the license.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the rec, though, which I think this is going to be interesting, and this is what I'm curious about, just because I'm having people approach me about the cultivating aspect of it, not necessarily the dispensing aspect of it, is that there are going to be people who all they do is cultivate, because they're going to be the wholesale for the retailers.
Right.
You don't have to you don't have to be a retailer and have to be associated with a specific wholesale. You could buy product from multiple wholesalers, which then means that the price is going to be a lot more than what you would be able to pay for medical, I think. This is my guess.
No, doesn't competitive market and
Yeah, I would
capitalism
think
create
it'd
a
be
lower?
less.
I'm not following the
Well, I
logic.
just think that you're gonna that the wholesalers can be able to,
Price control.
yeah, they can. If you're in charge of your own product, you don't have to pay for the middleman. Do you know what I mean?
So wouldn't that
That'll be
cheaper?
interesting to see.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it'll be.
So just those definitions work for me. At least putting them into our working document. How does the group feel about that? Using those.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
definitions?
think we're going to need those definitions. I think, as Jessica says, I think the definitions in the medical one, they got tweaked a little bit in the regs, and so I don't know what's going to happen with those, but I think that they're largely going to follow these things. So I think, as far as our goal of kind of putting a framework in place and adding to it as we've done, I think those are the sort of establishments that we need to be looking at.
So can we add those definitions to our
Sure.
working
Do you want
document?
to add independent testing laboratory as well? Because that could be
I
a
guess
separate
it's another
business.
business.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
That could be a separate
Yeah,
business.
that could be.
And then that leaves distance from schools and also where we want to zone these. I'll
Right.
start with the latter because the first one's going to be contentious. So is this. But our UMDs and RMDs are essentially the grow are mill industrial, and we have highway business for the retail with medical currently. I say that we keep that, but add business to the retail component. There you go.
What business? Neighborhood business, downtown business?
Downtown business. Sorry, you're right, I should have been specific about that.
So retail, so you would have manufacturing only in the mills and the industrial, and
that one definition that was the retail there that you had, that
So there's
would be
cultivator and manufacturer. Those are two separate entities.
right. So
But they're
cultivator
both-
is growing, manufacturing is turning that into some marketable product.
Right.
So you would put both of those in mills and the industrial, and retail in highway business and downtown business.
and also potentially mill and industrial. I wouldn't, I mean, they could still go into mills.
And then based on that, you would say if you had I mean, you couldn't then do, so if you were in a mill building, you could cultivate and produce and retail.
That's right.
But if you were in a highway business, you could only retail.
And a good example would be our medical marijuana facility now that's awaiting the transfer of law, and it's going to have, by law, first dibs on opening a retail component. And they're in a mill in the Keystone
Right.
building, so they're the exact, I mean, yes, they're going to be able
Right, but not allowed, but I'm saying in your,
Only if the state doesn't get their regs in time, right? I mean, that's the way that I've read it, is that if the state doesn't get their regs in time, then the medicals can go automatically recreational.
Good point.
Right, but I
if they
think
get
they
the
do.
regs-
ahead of that.
But even if they have regs, don't they get priority over new applicants?
I don't know.
It says they do.
Okay.
I think in somewhere it says that. But the regs are gonna outline that whole process in more detail.
They will outline that process in whole detail.
Um,
Absolutely.
So what I'm clarifying is, so in your plan, you wouldn't be able to cultivate in the highway business.
Nor in the, well, that's an interesting point. Definitely not in the downtown business. And in the way I have it right now, not in the highway business either.
I
because
mean,
it
I
has
think
been
that makes
added.
sense. I mean, it is an industrial
Yes.
process. I mean, I think that it's, the mills and industrial zone make more sense for that.
I agree.
Do we have enough acreage for that kind of manufacturing and cultivation?
In mill and
In mill
industrial?
industrial in town right now?
I mean,
We still have open mill space.
Okay.
you folks have any thoughts about that?
No, I would just went back and looked at the purpose of this whole thing. Okay? And I got no problem with it, but what I really don't understand about this whole thing is, I mean, it says regulate the time, place, and manner of operations of cannabis establishments in a manner that promotes the character of Easthampton, is not unreasonably impractical, and does not otherwise conflict with the act. I like to drop part of that out of there and promotes the character of Easthampton. How can a pot shop possibly promote the character of Easthampton?
Start by removing the stigma against marijuana or cannabis. And
That's like
realize
saying
that
if you're
it's-
going to put another liquor establishment or something like that in Easthampton, what difference does it make? It's a business. So why do you need that in there?
I think that what it is that this bylaw is going to allow
It's
these
not going to promote the
uses-
character. How's it going to promote the character? You tell me.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I think that the way it is, the way that we're gonna hopefully roll this out will be consistent with the character of Easthampton. I mean, I think that's the goal.
Promote characters.
Yeah, it's actually to
Yeah, it's going to
diffuse
promote characters. That's exactly what it's going to do.
I see your point. I don't know.
I mean, it's just another business.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, Jimmy, I totally agree with you. It's going to be there. Okay?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
not
no.
going to promote the character of Easthampton. It just isn't.
Yes, whether it's good or bad, it's not going to. It's not whether.
What's like that?
I just don't.
Promoting is the word that.
Dave, you want to make a comment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you can keep the character part of it, but you just exist with the character or doesn't bother it, but don't promote the character.
Yeah.
I think people, what is the character of Easthampton? No one can say, because everyone's idea of the character is a little bit different.
Right.
I think
That's a good point.
I think that's, so it is our character. It isn't our character, but I don't think you have to say the character of Easthampton is marijuana. You know what I mean? The word
Promoted
promote.
on there, yeah. I mean,
That's all.
I tend to agree with that adjective, or verb. I don't know what it is. I think we probably could get rid of
Yeah, promote the character. That
Promoting.
doesn't necessarily make sense to me
Yeah.
either.
If you look at the medical marijuana purpose statement, I would encourage you to go look at it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't talk about Easthampton really at all. It talks about that it's recognized that this is the nature of this substance, that these dispensaries have, it's a little bit more, it's not as touchy-feely, it's more.
I tend to, I agree.
So,
It is recognized that the nature of the substance cultivated, possessed, and are sold by medical
Promoting the
marijuana treatment
substance.
centers and off-site medical marijuana dispensaries may have objectionable operational characteristics and should be located in such a way as to ensure the health, safety, and general well-being of the public, as well as patients seeking treatment. The specific and separate regulation of registered marijuana dispensaries, hereafter referred to as RMD, as medical marijuana treatment centers and off-site medical marijuana dispensaries, hereafter referred to as OMMD facilities, is necessary to advance these purposes and ensure that such facilities are not located within close proximity of minors and do not become concentrated in any one area of the city of Easthampton. Subject to the provisions of the zoning ordinance, Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws and 105 CMR 725.000, registered marijuana dispensaries and off-site medical marijuana dispensaries will be permitted to provide medical support, security, and physician oversight to meet or exceed state regulations as established by the Massachusetts Department of Health, DPA.
Yeah, so that's very
onerous.
It's a little more clinical.
Yeah.
a little more clinical, but there's a reason for that, under that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I
Well, it
tend
is
to
for
agree with it.
clinical.
So what would you
Promoting
say
the character of
to-
Easthampton, should we
Just leave that out, and the rest of it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Regulate the time, place, and manner of operation of the cannabis establishment in a manner that is not unreasonably impractical and does not otherwise conflict with the act.
I think that makes
Sounds cleaner.
I think that
Sounds
sounds
good
Does
to
that
me.
sound better?
I'm in.
So,
They may be picky, but
No, it actually
what
makes
are-
total sense.
so what are other people thinking about zones and uses and that sort of stuff?
I'm fine with it. It makes sense. Jim's point makes sense. I go with it.
Do you guys have any thoughts?
I got a lot of thoughts, but
Well, sure.
I just can't. I really can't get into it. Really can't.
Well,
I mean, I'm old school. I mean, I went to a lot of. I had a real bad experience when I was in the 7th and 8th grade with this kind of stuff. The police chief at the time had us all in an assembly at Maple Street School, believe it or not. That's how long ago that was. And they wanted to know if anybody was giving away dope or giving gum at the time, stuff like that. That was bad for the kids. That was, it was drugs. And they wanted to know if anybody was giving any candy or stuff like that. I remember going through all that. And my parents were warning me. I mean, this stuff was strictly taboo back then.
Yeah.
So now here we are, we're going to be selling it on Cottage and Union Street. I mean, to go from what I went when I was a kid to the way it is now, we'll say, well, guys, why is it just an old fogey, don't pay attention to him. I only tell you what I grew up as, okay? The morals that I had. I'm not saying this is a moral, but to go where I was, the way I was raised, in that type of atmosphere and that type of situation in the country back then to what it is now is just like night and day.
Big transition.
So you got to go with the times. You got to flow with the times. So it's passed. It's legal. Now we got to figure out where it's going to be.
Yeah. But I understand that. I understand that kind of feeling.
Sometimes it's hard.
It's
It
hard
really
to
is.
drop something like that.
Yeah. I understand that. That makes sense.
Well, everybody's pushing it, and it's going to be there.
And you use the word pushing?
Yeah, exactly. So now we're going to try to. I know what Jimmy's trying to do. I mean, and I'm on your side. I'm not against you. Okay. I just want to do the best in the cleanest way we can.
We do need to protect the youth.
And we got the Williston is up in arms over this, and there's a few people that I know that are up in arms over this whole thing. But it's like anything else. I mean, if you live in a society and the majority rules, that's just the way it is, whether you like it or not. I mean,
Well, and
Someone
the fact
asked
that-
me.
hold on, Jeff.
Go ahead.
that any kid going to any school in Easthampton can get taught anytime they want it.
Right.
It means that there's no point fighting that battle.
Right.
The battle that needs to be fought is education. If their complaint is that vulnerable children are going to be exposed to it? Well, no, because they've got to prove that they're 21 before they can get into the place. The laws are very specific. What we need to do is educate people.
Well, I think that it's not either or, right? I mean, I think it's both. I mean, I think that we've seen with other things like cigarettes and alcohol, right? That just exposing minors to sort of like common usage, even by adults, encourages them. And so I think that that's part of the aspect, at least to me, with the advertising and the visibility from the outside that gives me pause. Just the idea that, you know, if it's and you can't make it. I mean, everyone's going to know exactly what it is, including every kid in high school and middle school, as soon as it opens up. But to somehow minimize the fact that there's a stream of people going in and out and highlighting the use, that I think that part, and I don't know how much of that will be addressed by the regs related to marketing and what's visible display and all that, but that, I think education is going to be huge. I just don't think we need to say one or the other. I think
no, certainly not one or the other. It's
right.
It's a buddy system.
And I think the other thing, I mean, the growth and the production part for me, I don't really have any concern for that at all. I'm assuming that the regs will be comparable to what they are for medical. It will basically be an invisible structure. You know, you won't be able to detect odor. You won't be able to go in there and buy anything. You know, hopefully it will have the same security processes and everything we've got in the medical. So those ones don't give me as much pause. It's just the retail and the visibility and the proximity to me that is just something that I think that's sort of the nut we have to crack about how we deal with that. But
Can
Jessica.
I just, so I did a bunch of research and I have some documents that I think might be worth uploading to the Dropbox and having you take a look at. And they're actually sample ordinances from Oregon, from different communities there. Recreational marijuana use standards. So there's something in here which I hadn't even thought about until I read it, which is about home occupation.
Well,
so
we're back to our home kitchen.
We're back to our home kitchen. So, you know, I think it would be worth you just looking at these just to get a sense of what maybe some, I mean, and again, this is Oregon, this is not Massachusetts, but at least to get a sense of what other communities are regulating. And I think one thing that I would encourage the board to think about is distance of dispensaries from one another.
Yeah.
And because a lot of these communities have dealt with it, and you know, there has been a lot of controversy around the Green Mile, where the existing businesses that were located there it was an antique sort of row, and there's been tension between dispensaries and the retailers versus the old business, and I just want to be cognizant and thinking about that.
It was a big part of the medical too. I mean, the medical's got the distances,
right.
Both our bylaws
That's
and the
right.
state
And
law.
so that may be something that comes down in the regs. That's a good point, because it was in the medical, that it may also be in the recreational. And again, we don't know what those numbers are. But in Bend, Oregon, I found a couple of like GIS maps, which were kind of cool. I couldn't print them. I had some problems. But they basically did, and it was just like for assessment purposes only, but they did the buffers, and these towns are much bigger than we are. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But they did 1,000 feet from K-12 schools, 150 feet from childcare facilities, 150 feet from developed state, community, neighborhood, regional, urban plaza parks, and 1,000 feet from an existing dispensary, or 1,000 feet from an existing retailer. So they have GIS maps that sort of show you where these entities already are, and then creates the buffers around them so that you can, so somebody who's looking at this can get a sense of where they can and cannot be.
And
But
I
anyway.
think that would be really helpful for us to see some various distances from, and also one of the things we dealt with the medical is how do we define, the state reg was really wonky. It said like public and private K through 12 and other places where children typically congregate or something, but it allowed us to define it more clearly. So I think we added preschool and daycares, but we talked for a while about are we doing dance studios and that sort of stuff, and so I think that how we define all of that stuff is going to be important. The thing with the home kitchen, I think it's good to look at other bylaws, because one of the things that Dave said that I think struck a chord is this idea of, you know, erring on the side of caution. I mean, I'd like to see a bylaw that delineates what is allowed and basically doesn't allow anything else, because I'd rather have somebody come with a good idea and come back here and we can amend a bylaw to add that use than have somebody come up and realize that like we didn't think about home kitchens, and that's allowed and people, you know, selling stuff out of their back door.
Well, it would
Or at
take
least
the-
think about that if that's something we want to allow,
would
right?
take
No, but right now we allow we have residential kitchens as an allowable use
Right.
under home occupation. So
Right.
right now, I mean, there could be somebody that says, hey, instead of making brownies for the farmer's market, I'm gonna make a different type of brownie.
Decide if that's something
We
we
should
want,
think
but like,
about it.
I think we got to make sure that we're thinking of all the things, and that's where it helps to have other places that have gone through it, and hopefully,
So what I'll do is
That
I'll
will make it
scan
less
everything that I
confusing
found
for
and I'll
us.
put it into a folder, and then you guys can just take a look at it and start thinking about stuff.
okay.
And that definitely puts off our, oh, I'm sorry, I was just gonna quickly say, that puts off our discussion until next meeting of distances, because of
I think
looking at
that, so Jessica,
Right.
let's,
Sorry,
but
I
let's
didn't
think
think
about
about
what we asked Jessica to do on that, and Dave, I'm gonna let you comment on this, but, should we, because we're talking about, but also different categories, right? I mean, my thought was definitely daycares, preschools, and
Yeah.
K to 12,
Yeah.
public and private. I don't know if we want to go broader than that. And the park and stuff that she's talking there, like that, I don't know how you would define that, or if you can, it also may become a moot point when you look at all the zones for where it could be. I mean, there's the Pleasant Street Park over there that would impact the mill buildings. There's obviously the
We
boardwalk.
took into consideration where children typically congregate,
Right,
and we decided not to include that,
right.
so.
So, I mean, I don't know, do we first just want to see like different numbers for daycares, preschool through 12?
I agree, I think that's the way to go.
Well, we should start with that and then look at what's left.
Seeing that
What about like a home daycare? I mean,
do see that we
there's
have-
only.
I know that's the thing,
Well,
right?
that's
So-
the other
Only gonna
thing.
really be able, I know where the daycare businesses are.
Right.
But there's plenty of home daycares that, I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, there's probably a state list somewhere.
Right, they're all
but it's gonna
registered
be-
somewhere, but that's a lot more work for you. For purposes of this, we just look at the larger
Right.
commercial
That's the
daycare.
way to go.
Right.
At least,
Over a certain number of kids, whatever the state, you can't have more than what, 8, 12 kids in your house if you're doing a home
Right.
daycare,
oh yeah, if you could
right?
find out that number and use that, I mean, I'm sure
That's a good
it's,
idea.
you know,
Break-off point.
it's Little Bear, it's Young World, it's,
Right. It's the one in the industrial park.
yeah, the one,
Yeah.
and then the old Catholic church, what's the,
Well, just sort of, that makes me think on the, if you're allowing this in industrial zones, we don't have a lot of industrial land, and you're basically got one school at one end of Industrial Parkway and a
Yeah.
daycare at the other end. So, I mean, not that there's a lot of space left in Industrial Parkway at all, but I'm just,
So
Right.
you're pointing out there may actually be no industrial space, given if we put too much buffer
certainly,
between.
Correct.
right. So I think we should, if you could do that and do like
Okay.
200, 500, 1,000.
We'll see
I
what
mean,
we
I don't
can
know,
do.
what do people think are good numbers to have?
I love what you're doing right now. For me, it's 200 feet as a basis, but you're putting some variance in there for me too.
So I think if we can look at them and see, I mean, my thought was to go with the 500 personally, just my gut reaction when I looked at it. I think that was the minimum that they, or that's sort of the baseline that they put in the statute where you can go below, but I think it would be really helpful to look and see what the impact of all of this is. 'Cause
Our
I know
medical is 200.
Right,
our medical, but it's 500 in the state regs, and we changed that.
right.
Yeah.
And
Change
so,
Change that. Do you recall
We're
why
a
we changed
very
it?
small, by landmass city, we don't have a lot of space.
Was
well,
it-
You
also
put
it
it too
didn't,
high and you're
it
gonna
didn't have
rule out
the,
everything.
I mean, I personally was comfortable with that without question because it was, because of the lack of any marketing. I mean, they're
Yeah.
really just vanilla buildings, and so you can't really tell. I mean, you know what that is, but it's not the same sort.
Just FYI, I
of
agree
retail,
with you
but-
on that signage component. I mean, 100%, and I do think that, you know, the protecting by way of visibility and the carding, I think that's all
I'm
valuable.
curious again to see how we're going to do that in light of the signage issues we've had. And you and I have talked about
But
that.
I just agreement
yeah.
about that
well,
aspect.
and the other thing is, I think that if you're talking about grow or producing, that maybe that can be in closer proximity to a school because it doesn't have that same risk. I mean, I could be easily convinced that that is basically a medical facility in that it is invisible and inaccessible, and maybe that can go 200 feet from a school. But it's just, and I think it'd be important to see on a map how that lays out.
So are you asking her to do different radiuses
So
to show us?
200 and 500, I think.
I think,
Okay.
that's, I think that's reasonable. I don't think
Okay.
1,000
Agreed.
makes sense.
Does that give us at least? I
Yeah.
mean, not that we're bound
For
by one or
schools
the
and
other.
daycares.
Schools and daycares, public and private.
Over whatever number that is, 12
Yeah.
kids or whatever.
All right,
it
and we
is.
keep cutting off Dave. Dave's got,
That was
chime
good
in on
work.
this one, please, Dave.
Well, I have a question, but, you know, regarding schools and daycares, remember, they're allowed in any zone.
Right.
My question about schools and daycares is the opposite. So a marijuana facility of whatever it might be is permitted and cited and constructed. then a daycare comes in after the fact. How does that?
They're moving to the nuisance.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We talked about
Okay.
this before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Now, I'm just ignorant, on the cultivation, can it be grown outside? We have a lot of acreage.
I don't know if that's clear yet.
Well, that's
Right now,
true.
You have to have a fence that blocks it,
You have to
can't be
have a
visible.
fence,
Well,
but I don't think the
I guess-
regs are,
okay.
the regs will come, I think, clarify that.
Right.
Well, so we have a lot of city land right now. I lease 10 acres from the city. I don't want to compete with marijuana, I tell you, because I'm not going to win. I also, NIMBY, I don't want it in my backyard.
Yeah.
Is there going to be, so I'm talking from a zoning point of view, are you going to be looking at, I mean, it's prime agricultural land that I lease, so I don't see a good reason to disallow it, in all honesty.
So I think what the law says.
But I don't want it.
Wait,
I
am
think what.
can
Yeah.
I just, I apologize,
No,
I
no,
don't
go
want
for
your
it.
answer. I just want to make sure I understand because I'm a little confused. Are you saying that we should add agricultural in as a use for the grows?
No, my first question was a little bit out of ignorance. When you talk about the mill industrial, I'm asking, is it allowed outside in agricultural land? I mean,
If it's mill and industrial zoned and it follows the state law
So,
for.
you know, the parcels down by
Yeah.
Fort Hill Brewery, those are zoned industrial and those are fields.
right.
So, you know,
So right now
the
it-
question is, if
so
it allows grow outside, could somebody,
Also, there's the agricultural exemptions from all the zoning stuff, so I don't know.
I don't know how that's gonna,
I
I
don't-
don't know if that's gonna.
But so Dave, I think you can technically craft a scenario where you can grow outside, but reading what the requirements are, it's got to be invisible. Like you can only see it from an airplane. Like
Yeah.
even with binoculars, you can't. So
Yep.
my thought is that it's prohibitively expensive to create that. You would basically be building like a Walmart shell to grow in.
Well,
Also,
maybe
it's
that's
very
fine.
unlikely- I just
I was
wanna add,
assuming
it's
you'd have a
very-
special permit process at the least.
Well, it's very unlikely anyone would do it, David, because you have far less controls. You're introducing pests. You're
Yeah.
introducing the randomness. That's just not how it's done in any kind of commercial.
We went and toured.
No, go on Google Maps. Go over Southampton and really look at the green.
Commercial's a lot different.
Yeah, Dave. No, so Dave. When
Some of the stuff that's talked about in High Times is sold.
Yeah.
It's grown in Southampton.
So Dave,
Okay,
when
really?
we went and toured,
Okay.
when we went and toured the medical facility,
Yeah.
it's
Don't give
more
it
like
away.
it's more like a factory than a farm. I mean,
I agree.
the water is piped in. It's all
Yeah.
like UV lights. It's so high tech and
It's unbelievable.
HPS lights.
I mean, they're talking about they're making all of their employees shower before and after every
Yeah.
shift because they don't want to bring contaminants in.
Right.
Those
No,
those guys would lose sleep if they had anything growing in a field.
Now, the last thing I just want to say is I know a lot of people are, and this is where I'm old school, and I'm like Harry, a lot of people want to remove the stigma. And I don't mean to attack anybody. But you know, like my stepmother is going to die within a year of lung cancer. She was a defiant smoker. So when I went to the hockey rink this weekend and I see a young mother smoking cigarettes, I'm like, what? I'm like saying to myself, what do I do? Obviously, it's none of my business, but she's killing herself. And she's only, you know, she's young. I don't know the woman, so she's young. And, you know, so the stigma, though, you know, I know a lot of us are liberal. We don't want a stigma. We don't want to look down on people, but it's a barrier. You know, it's overcome. Yes, I know it's in the schools. Not as much in Easthampton as in other schools. I'll be honest with you, because I had kids in both. You know, and that doesn't mean we have other issues. But the stigma, you know, you don't want to. I don't want to scarlet leather on anybody, but standards are good. That means you have to, you know, easy. Anytime you have an easy entry, an easy barrier to entry, you know, you have, you know, it's more like the Wild West, and you know, and I don't see a problem. You know, like smoking right now, you know, it's terrible. You know, the Washington Post had a big article. The tobacco companies, which are heavily subsidized, are marketing to poor and ignorant people. They don't have a fucking break. Excuse me. You know, I mean, they have stress, and then here they are being targeted. So, I mean, and marijuana has some bad things with the children. You know, 14. They say reckless behavior stops around 30. You know, but you know, the brain is forming. We know we can comfortably say 14 to 21, the brain is still forming.
Right.
And so, you know, the stigma. I don't worry about the people. I don't think Evans is all about that. And the hell with him. You know, he screwed up a closing of mine once. He was probably high. You know, not really.
Anyway.
I don't have any. I don't know. I mean, it was a joke. And you know, and so I see him up here advocating this. It's yeah, he can, oh, well, yeah, this is great, but then when you know, I mean, I do know people died of addiction in town, and it didn't start with opiates, they didn't start with painkillers.
So looking at the issue of the zoning and the uses and stuff, do you have any thoughts on sort of, we'll call it Jim's proposal at this point that no one has really objected to, sort of the growth and production in the mills and industrial?
Well, that's easy, I think.
That's the easy one, right?
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
So then retail, I mean, what do you think about retail in highway
retail,
business and?
Like John mentioned, to not have it in a highway business. We have a lot of highway business property, and I'll be honest with you, I keep looking at it from what I think is the best for the city, and I think highway business is appropriate. I don't, you can see where I'm coming from. I don't want it.
Right. Well, so that's what I was going to ask: is your reluctance on the highway business just because you're there, or is there another reason?
No, I think the highway business is appropriate.
It's logical.
The reluctance is personal.
Yep.
Because I think the highway business is appropriate, partly because the highway business is a automobile use.
Yep.
Area, so you have to drive to it. It's not, incidental necessarily. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know there's daycares, there's hair cutters and stuff, but I mean, you're not supposed to make it impractical or impossible to have. So where are you going to have it? I mean,
Right. And so why not downtown business?
Well, downtown business, I'm just giving in. I mean, one of Willison's, they don't want to say, one of their complaints is, Cottage Street's our gateway. When their prospective students are coming down the mountain, they come into Cottage Street, they're hoping to have that nice campus, welcoming gateway to the city. But, I don't know if it's the Devil's Triangle or whatever they call it, but, that is our entertainment district, so to
Right.
speak. It's
Yeah.
small. I mean, I like to see more restaurants there and another bar, and I guess this is so downtown business. My only concern about downtown business, but it's not practical, was if you could limit it. But how could you? I don't really care.
To the school.
Yeah, I mean, I think the school radius thing is gonna
Well, hopefully
drive
we're going to get a new school. Every one of you guys is going to be out there saying yes to the new elementary school.
Absolutely.
That will solve that. No, that would just take the edge off some of this.
Yeah, I
exciting.
agree wholeheartedly.
But but downtown business. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't have it in a downtown business. Personal issues aside, I mean, it's
Right.
here. It's here to stay, and why not? I mean, if you're not going to have it in downtown business, then why even have it? I suppose.
Right.
I
All right,
mean,
thank you, Dave. Thanks for your honesty too.
Yeah, good
Appreciate
comments.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Talking about 5 stores or 20 stores selling it?
Well,
That's another issue.
I don't think, from what we've discussed, I'm not sure, it could go any way, but I don't think we're talking about a limit to the number of stores. I think what we're talking about is a distance between them, which will naturally cause limitations to occur.
Yeah.
It may almost end up like a density bylaw or something where once you put in these radiuses, both from schools and preschools and from each other,
There's just no
that
places.
there won't be the ability to do that many. But I think that's all gonna. I mean, we have the ability to limit. I think all tied to the alcohol licenses in the town or something. But we haven't gotten that far, and my guess, I think that Jim's probably right, is that we won't know if we even need to address that until we sort of see how the green areas shake out on the map.
So if you were to limit, and this is by the approval of the voters, so I checked with the mayor's office today, and it's for number of licensed retail sale of alcoholic beverages not to be drunk on the premises. So it's like package stores, not restaurants, not bars, not anybody's got a liquor license. It's for those that are just.
It's Biggie's and the package stores.
So there's 4 all alcohol package stores, and there's 4 wine malt stores for 8 total. So no more than 20% is 2, right? Is that right? Did they calculate that right?
Yeah. Is the 20% specifically for retail
Limit
marijuana?
yes, for retailers.
Right, okay.
And that's a minimum, right? We can't say there's less than that.
Right.
To limit to fewer than 20% of the number of licenses.
We can't limit fewer than 20%, right?
No, if you were, this is approval for the voters. If you wanted to limit the number of marijuana establishments, you'd have to do it through a vote.
And it couldn't be fewer than 2.
Prohibit the operation of one or more types of marijuana establishments. So going to that definition of marijuana
Yeah.
establishments, which includes cultivators, everything. Limit the number of retailers to fewer than 20% of the number of licenses issued within the city or town. So you would limit it to 20% or below off of that 8.
Oh, I thought we couldn't go below that number. I thought it was, you weren't allowed to limit it.
That's what I thought.
If you're going to limit it, I mean, this is if a city or town wants to limit the number of marijuana establishments, they have to do it through a law, and these are the ways that they can limit it.
Well, we're not there
Okay,
yet.
we're not, yeah, that's
Okay.
several steps ahead anyway.
Okay.
Down the
Okay,
line.
so I think that we've covered some good ground tonight. I think that if we come back, how long is this research? Do you want to do 2 meetings?
I don't know. We still have to do the map for the seasonal cottages, which hasn't been done yet for the
yeah.
next meeting. It's
That's
gonna
the next-
depend
that's
on
the next
Jamie's
meeting.
schedule.
That's
to be
the next
honest,
meeting, right,
because
the
she's the one
September.
doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, September 5th is the next meeting.
With great respect, because I think you do an amazing job, and I know you're buried. And also, my gratitude for staying late for everyone tonight to get this done. I despite all that, humbly request that we try to keep, if possible, we try to keep it on the next.
We can do it on the 5th. If we don't have the maps ready, we don't have the maps ready, and you
Yeah.
can talk about something else.
Yeah, well, and I think, so in keeping with the homework assignments for everybody from meeting to meeting to keep us on point, I think if
I'll give you all
Jessica
this stuff.
uploads that stuff, if we can read that and give that some thought, because I think
That's a good idea.
thinking of the cracks that we could be missing, I mean, that's the part I really want to make sure, because I don't want to end up with someone coming in next summer with an idea we didn't think of. Unless it's something that we've prohibited and they can come here and we can try to amend it.
Yep.
So I think
Okay.
if we look at it with that in mind especially, I think that might be really helpful. And
Fair.
if we have maps of school buffers by then that'd be great. And if we don't, then we can do it at the 19th, on the 19th.
Yep.
And maybe
That's fair.
Adjust the purpose, is what we said, and throw in some of the definitions that you had into our working model. And,
Oh, yeah.
And the proposed zoning locations.
Yeah.
Just as sort of a working stuff.
All right, that sounds great.
That's a lot. But yeah, I think that-
Thanks very much for your input.
Take care.
No one's
All
going
right.
to be able to watch this video and say
So-
we're not doing our job.
That's right. So, we'll put that on the agenda for the 5th. I don't think we need to formally continue anything. Are there any other administrative items, Jessica?
God, no.
Thank God.
Motion to adjourn.
Who made that?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Goodbye.
you, everybody.